Okay, my name's Mikey. Let's find out who we've got around the table. What's your name?
I'm Asher.
Asher, welcome. And
Christian.
And
Timna.
And Margot.
And obviously it's early days, we're just starting, but I feel we need to warm this up so when the big crowd comes through, we've got the flow going. So has anyone got any thoughts, comments, suggestions, ideas, observations, interjections, suppositions?
I think it's really special to walk through the whole museum without any other one.
Yeah. Okay. Has anyone else done that?
Yeah. I was working here during COVID, and so I was coming in once a week when it was completely empty. And during the summer, it was gorgeous. You could walk around the whole museum, the light would be flooding through, it would be pitch silent. And when you're in the main hall, you can hear your footsteps reverberate around the entire Hinsey Hall, and it's great. Yeah.
So we just got someone dying there in there. Why don't you just... Yeah, we all die. One of the things we were talking about in the earlier gig is that we all die. We're all going to die. Okay, so where do we want to go? Do we want to talk about the museum being empty? Should it be like a sort of luxury kind of, like a one-person museum? Should you like have special times when you can just go on your own and be the only person in the museum? Hello? We've got tape. Okay, fantastic. Right, okay, so we've got that. We're all going to die, and we've got Margot demonstrating that over there. What do we want to talk about? Do we want to talk about the museum? Should it be just for individuals? Would that be a nice thing to do? Asher, have you ever been to the museum on your own?
I've been maybe like once or twice because I don't live in London. It's my first time coming for like a night event and seeing it so empty, as you said, is actually quite beautiful. But I don't think there's really one size fits all. There needs to be these almost like individualized portions of the museum. But running events like this is a really good way of doing it.
I mean, could you individualize the museum? Earlier on we were at the Festival of Genomics and we were talking about individualized tailored medicine. Could you have an individualized tailored museum experience? And what would that be?
We already have individual, what's the word that you use? Personalized experiences in the museum. Yeah. I think there's an event that goes on, I think, once a month that happens before the museum actually opens, and they just get kids that have learning disabilities to come in, and so they have a more quiet space with educators around to actually bring them through in a more conducive environment.
Okay, so probably not this environment where we're shouting on a microphone, but each to their own. I mean, any other ways to sort of personalize the experience, or is it already personal, the experience of the museum?
I think it's kind of personal because we are all unique, so I think we all have different thoughts in our heads, so I think it's kind of already the personal experience, because I'm sure I will definitely experience something else than Margot, when I eat the baguette. I mean, I'll also diet.
You'll probably be more successful at eating the baguette than Margot. Well, what is in your head? What are you thinking now?
What I thought when we were speaking about the personalized museum, I think the kind of specialness of the moment, having this museum. Sorry, I'm going to take this because if not, I'm going to...
Good.
So I think it gets special because normally, I really like this place, but it felt so special without other people. But I think just knowing that normally there are a lot of people here made it that kind of special. And I think if I would know that no one else never would be here, I wouldn't think it would be that special. And I think it would be kind of also weird to me, because I wouldn't like to be in such a huge building by myself. I think it would give me goosebumps.
You're in a rush, okay, all right. It's not a compulsory thing to take part in Talkaoke anyway, so don't worry about it too much. Is there a point here from you, Laura?
Actually, also I think it's quite incredible that this event is free, because I don't know if the Natural History Museum still does it, but they did like a sleepover in the museum, and that was like over £100 for the experience, which I think good for the museum, and I agree with that, but also it kind of...
It was a bit pricey.
Just by the idea that probably the people who would want to go and do it, that would be mainly tourists, kind of puts me off.
Yeah.
And this is more kind of, I haven't seen any proper advertising for it, so I feel like it's only people who like have the secret knowledge about this event.
Yeah.
So it feels special.
Okay, so in a way, this is a secret event. Hopefully it's not too secret.
Hello.
Hello?
By the way, hello. There are people lined up outside, so it's really exciting.
They're raring to go.
They're raring to go. Yeah, it'll be great. You'll be really good.
Yeah.
I will come by. I'm really excited to see this in action.
We're just doing a bit of a warm-up now, so we've got a flow going. By the time the people come, we're already in mid-flow. And we're talking about conversation here when we say mid-flow. But yeah, we're just, anything you want to throw in at the moment, we're talking about this feels very personal and individual because we're here by ourselves. Okay. What do you think about a personalised museum experience?
I mean, I had this idea where like, it's kind of like a dating app, but with scientists and people who work in the museum. Like they'll tell you about their research, and if they swipe right on you, you get to give them a personalised tour around the museum and their labs and etc.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, I don't think we get to engage with scientists in person.
So it's a kind of Tinder for science engagement.
Yes, Tinder for science engagement.
Okay, well, that's definitely a... hello. How's it going so far? Come and have a seat if you want to. I can tell that you're doing some kind of job here, but you can do it from around the table. It's just a warm-up anyway. We've got Asha, we've got Christian, we've got Timna, we've got Margot, we've got Laura and Mikey.
Don't ask us to sing.
No, there's 2 rules on Talkaoke you'll be very pleased with. One is no singing, the other one is no fighting.
No fighting.
No fighting, no. No singing, no fighting. They're the 2 rules. I mean, for a place like this, we'd never normally erupt into singing or fighting, but just they are the 2 rules.
Let's see what.
Oh, yeah, come on, yes.
Hopefully my manager is a singer.
Okay, so tell us your name.
Jasper.
Jasper. We have got, as I said, Asha, Christian, Timna, Laura, Margot, and Mikey. Come and join in for 2 minutes.
Okay.
What's your name?
Ijas.
What was it?
Ijas.
Ijas. At the moment, we're sort of talking about a personalised museum experience. Yes, you can come and get involved in this if you want to. Yes, you can. Yes. We'll give you a round of applause. We're just warming up, so when the people come, we're in mid-flow and we're like energetic. Thank you. Come and have a seat. Come and have a seat. So we have got Idias, we have got Asha, we've got Christian, we've got Jasper, we've got Timna, we've got Laura, we've got Margot and Mikey. Tell us your name.
Liz.
Liz, welcome. We're not really talking about anything so far. We're talking about what it's like to be in the museum at night, and you're the only person around. It's a bit night at the museum, but then it moved on to this idea of a personalised museum experience. Can you personalise it? Can you make it your own thing? Timna said it's always personal because my head is different from your head. Anyway, Margot.
I can't remember who mentioned about the young children who come in and have the sessions here when it's a little quieter. I do have a feeling though that it does our how we receive what's on display in the museum is affected by the people around us, and I think what you said about the events, which are like quite expensive to come and do in the museum, I think that really almost like selects people who are around each other, and I think that just creates a different kind of dynamic. If you open that event, that sleepover for £100 a ticket, if you open it up to general public or allocated half of the tickets for free, you may get a different experience. But maybe we don't want that. Maybe we don't want the full experience. Maybe we want an exclusive experience of people who are like us, look like us, and experience art in the same nice way. They're not going to touch the artworks, which obviously is going to stress you out, the security people, but
Yeah, I mean, for those people that are concerned with the security, have you done a sleepover? Is it a bit of a difficult one to kind of watch over?
No, that was quite easy, I will say.
Yeah?
The people, they just enjoy themselves, explore themselves. They're not into making problem. So most of the people, they just come to enjoy and experience these things. And it is hardly we have any issues.
Did people have any nightmares or bad dreams?
No, I don't remember. I had only one of these. But only thing that was for the kids.
Yeah.
So to keep an eye, like if they are safe,
Yeah.
they are not running around damaging. They can do anything.
Yeah. But they were quite well behaved by the sounds of it.
But when they're together, so you don't know when
Yeah,
they gang up or when.
Yeah, it can be big. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Laura?
I actually have questions, sorry,
Yeah.
because I find it really fascinating. The only place I slept overnight as a kid was
Hang
a
on sec,
kindergarten.
we want a final thought from Liz before you go. This is how the order of the day for the whole rest of the evening. Anyone leaves, we want a final thought from them.
I really like eating staff canteen food.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you need the carbs, the double carbs
Is
when
it
you're really
quite
hungry.
carb heavy
Yeah,
then?
like yesterday they had pasta and chips.
Yeah. Well, like a chip-based pasta or a pasta-based chip?
Both.
Yeah.
Just both. And you can even get sides that are also carbs. So you can also get
Yeah.
rice, you know what I mean? It doesn't stick to any kind of identity. It isn't Italian, it isn't French. It's just
kind
a
of
mixture.
cosmopolitan,
Yeah, maybe that's the reflection of the museum and who we are as people.
Okay, well that's an interesting
Just
thing
like
to throw in. Yeah, okay. So, loving the carbs we're getting here. Okay, that's a good point. That was something we didn't know about the museum. Were you asking a question, weren't you, Laura?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
In terms of like the sleepovers, either for kids or adults, is it like a kind of a curfew hour when you say like, okay, so now
it's
everyone
bedtime.
actually goes to sleep, or can people just, if they want to sleep, they sleep, but if they want to wander, they wander, or is there like a
Is there
lights
a curfew?
off?
Is there lights off? Is there?
you have to go to sleep,
Yeah.
and then
Or is there an all-night party going on?
yeah, exactly. What like how does
Yeah.
it work, and
Yeah.
are people snoring?
We've already got the gaffer tape. Yeah. Was it Liz that brought it? Okay, yeah, we've got gaffer tape. That's the main thing. Come and join in the conversation at the moment. We're talking about sleepovers. How does it work? Is there lights out? Is there a curfew? Can you just wander around the museum and do an all-night party?
And where do people sleep if they want to sleep? Like,
Yeah. Where do they sleep? Okay, well, let's ask the experts. So answer some of these questions. Jasper?
No, I have to, because that was, I think, soon after COVID, back in 2021, I think. So that's true. People, they bring their own bags, they sleep. We turn off the light at a certain time.
Okay.
People do snore.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Is it like loads of snoring, or is it just one or two snores?
When it's like 100 or 200 people in one gallery,
there's going to be a lot.
There is a next one, and there is a next one.
It's almost like a choir of snoring.
Actually, I remember we had one problem.
Yeah.
There were some guys outside. They had sports car, and they were revving and making all this noise.
Right.
And all the guests, they were just so annoyed. They could not sleep.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Okay, so there was someone outside with a sports car.
And making all the noise.
Okay.
So they were just on this exhibition road.
Yeah. Final thought for now, Asher?
Sleepovers are cool, and you can't spell museum without us.
Okay.
I'm gonna come back.
Okay. All right. Okay. What's that?
What did he say? What was the second thought?
I didn't actually hear what he said. Yeah.
can't spell museum without us.
Oh, you can't spell a museum without us. Okay. You can? What do you mean you can spell a museum without us?
No, you cannot.
Yeah, you can't.
No, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's what he was saying. wasn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, where are we going to go with this conversation? We don't have to talk about the museum because some people work here, some people don't. Yeah.
I'm going to go and get Larice, but I mean, when you do a sleepover with a bunch of strangers, it's not the snoring you have to worry about, it's the farting through sleep.
Okay. Okay, was there any farting going on? Was there any
Silent snoring.
was there any, was it loud? Was it silent but violent?
Violent for the nose.
Yeah.
No, we have one of our ears that's already blocked.
Yeah.
And other one we don't tend to use.
Yeah. Okay, so it's definitely hear no evil kind of thing.
No, I don't think. But maybe that's the good thing about sleepover, this experience. So if we want to enjoy this nice, comfortable sleep, we can sleep at home. we should, or anybody who is coming to sleep, or strange people with a strange place, he should expect something which is not normal or they're not used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like the best night's sleep ever, is it?
So even if someone is farting and all that kind of noise, that's what makes it memorable.
It's very natural as well, isn't it? And we're in the Natural History Museum, so it sort of makes sense.
That's the point.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about farting in the museum now. Is it a problem? Is it a problem?
Yes, big problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, is there anything you can do about it? Or is it, can you throw someone out for farting?
No, we can just negotiate with him.
Okay.
We can just listen him just to avoid the things.
Yeah, and guide them into the...
Because it's something, he's doing the same thing. If we do, then it will not make sense.
Okay. Currently we're talking about strategies for dealing with farting in the museum. Is it just a natural thing?
Yeah.
Justin, have you got any views on this?
Yeah, I think it's pretty natural, you know. Like my mum always said, better out than in.
Better out than in. I mean, do you think we're a little bit too oversensitive towards farting?
Well, I don't know. You got to respect people's noses, and you know, you don't want to fill up their noses with little particles of your. Yeah. You know what it is.
Yeah. Okay, we've gone too far now. We're talking about farting in the...
Maybe these two are just let one rip.
But you know the drill. We want a final thought from you. It doesn't have to be about farting in the museum. It can be about anything.
But museum Natural History Museum, I love this place.
Yeah, is it a fantastic place to work?
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Even walking around, this sense of connection with the nature, that makes it a great place to work.
Okay, so it's a great place to work, a great place to connect with nature. You agreeing with that? Anything else you'd like to add?
No, nothing.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right, well, good luck tonight. Hope everything goes well.
Yeah.
Come and join in on the table of chat. This is Talkaoke, pop-up talk show. I may have been in, I don't know where Cumberland Market is. It's in Camden, isn't it? Yes, I was there in the heat of the summer, and now it's winter, and I'm here in the Natural History Museum. Come and have a seat so you know the drill. We have got Timna, we have got Justin, we have got
Rachel
and Mick. And we potentially got this person. Okay, soon we'll have that person. All right, okay, 10 minutes is a long time on Talkaoke. You could probably do 5 or 6 subjects in that time. But it's kind of up to you where you want to go. So far we've talked about what it's like to be in the museum when it's completely empty, the personalised museum, museum experiences for kids with learning difficulties. Then we talked about the sleepover. Should the sleepover actually be free? And then we talked about the snoring and other noises that happen in the night. And that's basically where we are now. We're kind of stuck on the ethics of farting in the museum. And apparently the security would have a word with you if they kind of caught you doing it. But that's about as far as we've got. But, you know, I feel like we've kind of gone down a little bit of a cul-de-sac with the farting in the museum. It's up to you where you want to take this conversation. It could be anywhere. So any thoughts? What brings you here tonight?
What's the sleepover? Tell us about the sleepover.
Okay, well, I'm going to get either Justin or Timna to explain the sleepover. Can you explain the sleepover?
About it, because I've worked on them.
You worked on it?
I've worked on one of them. They're pretty wild, actually. So the idea with the sleepover is that kids come, and they pay a fair bit of money to come and sleep over with their parents in the main hall under the big whale, and they do a bunch of activities in the night. And then they just sleep under the whale, and then they wake up in the morning and
they
go
have
home.
a whale of a time.
That's the one.
Okay, so that's it, and it sounds like it's a lot of fun. No pressure. Good luck with the talk. So yeah, that's the sleepover. Is it something that you would consider doing, Mick?
Probably not. No. I just wondered what it was.
Okay. Would you do it?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I just wonder if it's a bit frightening.
Is it frightening? I did actually ask the security guards whether anyone had nightmares, and they said no. There was no nightmares recorded as far as they know.
And then what do they do during the night? Because you said they do activities.
Yeah, so one of the activities that I work on is, you know, the dinosaur exhibit. Yeah. They cut all the lights off, so it's pitch black, and they put out these it's like this little jigsaw where you've got to find all these bits of the dinosaur to find out the name of the dinosaur. But it's pretty wild, it's pretty crazy, because you get all these kids running around in the pitch black, screaming different little bits of dinosaurs, and their parents are trying to run after them to help them out.
It sounds like a total nightmare to me.
But they have so that's the kids' night. That's the kids' night. But they have an adult version, which is obviously quite different.
Yeah. Is it still about finding bits of dinosaur, or is it different?
I don't know. I think it's a bit more grown up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you've worked on these sleepovers.
I have. I've worked on a couple. Yeah.
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 How many people do the sleepover? How many people do the sleepover?
I think last time we were there, the main hall was pretty packed. I'd be guessing about a couple hundred people. Yeah, including parents.
Okay.
Some come with the whole family, because it's quite an experience for them, isn't it, to come in and kids at that age, they love animals, they love dinosaurs. So
We're only here. It's a heat hub tonight, isn't it? Really.
It's a what?
It's a heat hub.
Okay, so you're here just to keep warm. Well, you might be a bit disappointed. I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt, so obviously I'm not going to be that warm. But I'm not feeling that much warmth right now. Okay, so you've come here just to warm up, basically.
It's a good.
But hopefully you'll be warmed by the conversation. Although it is early days, we're expecting a flood of people. Somehow you've been the trickle before the flood. Yep.
Where have you been before? Where have you been before you came to?
How did you make it? Where did you come from?
What you mean in the museum?
Okay.
We were just looking at the Marlin,
right?
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then we looked at a board, and we're going to the Attenborough thing.
Okay. What's happening in there?
What was it? I can't remember now.
But
hang on. It's about Arabic text.
Oh, that's it.
Right.
And that looks pretty interesting.
I mean, what are they saying? We probably don't know, but what are you expecting to hear about Arabic text?
It was about early biology, wasn't it?
It was about how an Arabic text had revealed some kind of scientific information.
So it's about that kind of Arabic scientific revolution.
I guess.
Back in the days.
Yeah.
16th century, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the Arabic age of enlightenment.
Yes. So, okay, it sounds like a very interesting topic. You will have to come back and tell us about it.
We did want to go and see the dinosaurs.
The dinosaurs as well, yeah.
Yeah, but we came here instead.
Okay.
Because it looked interesting.
Well,
and we heard you talking about farting. So.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, did dinosaurs fart? Do we know that?
That's what finished them off.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
It's climate change.
It wasn't.
They blew themselves away.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all that methane.
I'm blown away by that idea. We've got a couple of new faces to the table. So we have got Rachel, and we've got
Luis.
And we've got Timna and Laura. What's your name?
Margot.
At the moment we're talking about we were talking about dinosaurs farting, and is that actually what killed them off? Was it climate change, methane-induced climate change? I don't know if anyone else has got any. Are we a bit obsessed with dinosaurs when there's so many other beings and creatures?
I think it would be a really cool new reinterpretation of the Big Bang Theory, like saying like boom, like maybe like it happened the other way around, like dinosaurs and then boom, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you could look at time going backwards as well, couldn't you? I mean, we experience it going forwards to us, but maybe we are just going to end in a little dot. From the universe's perspective. I don't know. Sorry, I just got a bit cosmic there. Larissa, have you got anything to add to this?
Can I have a quick rundown?
Okay, so we started off talking about the a night in the museum, how fantastic it is to be in the space where there's nobody there. Then we talked about the personalised museum experience, and we talked about different museum experiences for different people, like the kids with the learning disabilities. Then we talked about hang on. We'll come to the farting in a minute. I will say, for those curious people, this is Talkaoke, pop-up talk show. Do come and have a seat on the table. At the moment, we're talking about farting dinosaurs, but I'm just trying to explain why and how we got there. And I don't mean evolutionary, I just mean within this conversation. But don't sit on the cheap seats. Come forward, because they're only for when other seats are filled up already. So give us a final thought before you go.
Oh, about what?
And it could be anything, whatever's in your head.
Oh God, I'm looking at that rhinoceros.
Yeah.
I can hardly say it.
That's a bit nosy,
Painted.
isn't it? Yeah.
It's quite. I don't want to say.
Are you an artist or a painter?
I am actually.
Yeah.
Because it's not you, is it? But the bloke who set this up was at St Martin's.
That is me.
It is you. I met you.
I know. I
met you.
I don't look old enough, but that is actually
You look
me.
younger now than you did then.
Yeah, definitely.
You look 10 years younger.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. That's good. Anyway, that's a good final thought. A final thought from you,
My
Rachel.
final thought. I think I don't like flies.
You don't like flies?
Flies give me the creeps.
Okay.
Yeah. I've seen 2 flies in here, and I don't like either of them.
Okay. That's an interesting one. We're drawn to dinosaurs, but we're not drawn to flies, which is interesting.
Not a very good rhinoceros, though, is it?
Not a very good.
No, it's not a very good rhinoceros.
Well, I'll leave
that
that to
one's
you
good.
as a
That one's
painter.
better.
As a painter, I'll leave that to you. Anyway, we've got new faces at the table. Thank you, Mick and Rachel. Let's find out who we've got. Some people have moved around. We've got Timna, we've got Margot, we've got Laura. Tell us your name. Come forward a bit as well, because I can't stretch that far. Tell us your name.
I'm Sasha.
Sasha.
Yeah.
And
I'm Victor.
Victor, yep.
And Zet.
Lucia.
Loris, yep. Joanna. And
Sitana.
Sitana. Welcome to Talkaoke. It's a free-form talk show. Now it makes more sense to explain where we're going, but it's kind of up to you. The whole point of Talkaoke, it is up to you to decide what you want to talk about. My job is simply to swivel around, give people the microphone, and to try and make sense of all the different things that people are saying. So far, we've talked about the personalised museum experience, we've talked about the sleepover, we've talked about the noises in the night that happen during the sleepover. We found out the security guard's policy towards farting. Then, did farting kill off? Do dinosaurs fart? Did they die finally from too much methane in the atmosphere? And we're here now. So we're in a bit of a silly kind of trajectory, but we can go anywhere with this conversation. It's up to you, Margot.
I wonder if, because people are so fascinated by dinosaurs, obviously they are no longer about, just in case anyone wondered. Yeah. But I wonder if they were around now, would we be farming them? Would there be like a methane problem with dinosaurs because we'll be just would they be,
instead of domesticating cows, would we domesticate the Diplodocus? I heard somebody in the museum call it yesterday, I call it a Diplodocus, but they said Diplodocus. Joanna?
Oh, sorry. I've heard that dinosaurs come from chicken, so maybe if they would taste like chicken, probably the chicken farming industry would be on it.
Oh no, that's the wrong one. Okay, so it would be like I mean, imagine Kentucky Fried Dinosaur.
Exactly,
thank you. It would be huge. It would be bigger than the bargain bucket that you get now. A Diplodocus dipper, would it work? Could we farm dinosaurs even now in a kind of Jurassic Park type scenario? Would people eat? Let's have a show of hands. Would you eat? Who eats chicken, first of all? Maybe we'll just start with that. Some chicken eaters. Would you eat dinosaur? Yeah, you would. No, you say no. Why, Louise?
No, it just doesn't seem appealing. I like to stick to what I know.
Okay, what is that, chicken?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a bit of lamb if I'm feeling really frisky.
But, Lucia, you would eat dinosaur?
I mean, we have chicken nuggets that are in the shape of dinosaurs already, so it's just going one
step. So, in a way, it's almost like a harbinger of what's to come, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so... I mean, is it possible? It sort of makes sense if you're going to go for livestock farming to think bigger. What's that?
There's a couple behind you.
Okay, yes.
I just want to say, because somebody mentioned about the NHM canteen, and maybe that's some kind of like a market niche that they could explore, just like really kind of go big on fake dinosaur meat.
Yeah.
People come here for obviously the exhibitions and learning, but they should be coming. This should be like a food destination. Yeah. Like, what's wrong with that?
Okay. Is it the missing link in terms of the canteen, the dinosaur snacks?
I don't have an answer to that, but I was thinking about like how the skin of a dinosaur would taste, or would it be like chewable? I don't know, because for me, like I always have the impression that the skin of a dinosaur must be super thick, but I have no clue.
I don't know. We'll ask our dinosaur expert.
I think if you are going to fry a dinosaur, you would need a really big frying thing.
Yeah. Okay. That I think.
So, are we chopping the dinosaurs before frying them, or we frying them whole?
Okay.
That's the question.
Yeah. I mean, I
deep
guess,
fried. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Deep fried.
Okay. All right. There's a point over here.
I feel like you'd fry it skin down like a fish with lots of butter. And it would be like really crispy.
Okay, butter. You need quite a lot of butter.
Like lots of butter, lots of garlic, lots of rosemary.
Okay, this is Talkaoke. You're welcome to come and join in. Person over there, I can't really, my eyesight's terrible, but we're talking about, would you eat a dinosaur? Just a yes or a no? No, okay. What's that?
Can we talk about the Flintstones then? Did they eat the dinosaurs?
Do they?
Did they? I don't remember exactly.
I can't remember what it's called. It's like a Bronto steak or something. Yeah, they had steak. I don't think it came from chickens. I think it was dinosaur steak.
I'm pretty sure their car is also a dinosaur, but like one of them has a bone on his clothes.
Yeah. It was foot powered. I mean, it's not for me to give the facts or opinions here, but people around the table are saying that the Flintstones car was foot powered. Maybe there's an element in the museum we can find out about this Flintstones research. There's probably a specialist somewhere that can tell us how that worked, the Flintstones car. Where are we going to go with this conversation? Do we want to talk about farming? Do we want to talk about dinosaurs, Jurassic Park type scenarios? It's kind of up to you. We've got a new face at the table. Tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Christian.
Christian, at the moment we're talking, would you eat a dinosaur, just to begin with?
What, would you eat a dinosaur?
No, would you eat a dinosaur?
Yes.
Yes.
You eat birds, and birds are dinosaurs.
Okay, so how would you cook it? Similar to a chicken?
And it depends on what you have in your fridge and what carbohydrates you're pairing it with, you know.
We've already heard, actually, before most people got here, that carbohydrates are very important for the Natural History Museum. But I don't know how heavy in carbohydrates a dinosaur would be. Would you eat a dinosaur? Tell us your name as well again.
Asher. I was here earlier, and I would not eat a dinosaur.
Why?
Vegetarian.
You're a vegetarian?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give you a... No, I mean... and we've got a new face over here. Tell us your name.
Josh.
Josh, would you eat a dinosaur?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any particular species?
Probably like all of them.
All of them, okay. Okay, so where are we going to go with this conversation? I feel like everyone, is vaguely kind of approving of this kind of Jurassic Park type scenario, but in a farming way.
I think most people won't, because I know I come from Sudan and they eat camel, and they had to kind of coerce me into that. And I think there's some animals that people, or whale would eat.
What was a camel like?
I don't remember. I just was really.
Were you traumatized by it?
Yeah, it really was. And my sister only reminded me of that like last week, and that's why it's at the top of my mind, because I think I forgot about it. So.
Okay, so it can be traumatic eating larger animals, such as the camel.
But I think it's similar for horse. I mean, I remember when I was a child, and my sister, I think, just to be horrible to me, said, she wasn't a horse, so it is not what she said. But
I've got these animal sounds mostly for the kids, but useful tonight.
Yeah, it's good tonight.
Yeah.
No, but she said to me like, "Oh, you know what this is made of?" And I said, "No, what?" And she said, "Oh, salami is made of horse meat," and that was just so. I don't know. It just didn't feel right because it's such a noble animal. But then, but again, like. Dinosaurs are quite noble animals, I would say, or were, but I mean, it's a matter of perspective.
We are a kind of, we're very discriminating about which animals we like to eat, or we have got an affinity with. Like dinosaurs are big, but I don't see any insect skeletons in the museum.
Oh.
So
Insects don't have skeletons.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
But okay, so but there's no is there insect carcasses? Are there insects Exoskeletons?
So the Natural History Museum is, the way to think about it is it's less of a museum but more of a library. And instead of having books, we have flesh. So this museum here holds about 4 billion objects. I work in the mammal section, and we have about 400,000 individual specimens. So these are 400,000 dead animals. And every single one of these specimens becomes a repository for knowledge as given a specific species in a specific place in a specific time. And you can tell a lot of information about the genetics, what they've been eating, how time has changed, and how how the climate changing has impacted them, how people moving to areas have impacted them. So there's a lot of dead bodies here, but they're all for good purposes.
Okay, so it's actually full of corpses, the History Museum, but corpses of animals. Are some animals more popular than others?
To eat or to research, or where are we going with this?
Any of those things?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think people
have. You got a camel, by the way?
We have several camels, yes, I think so.
Yeah.
But I guess people have affinities with different animals. A lot of people are very interested in mammals because we're closely related to them. Some people like insects. I guess it's different strokes, different folks.
Yeah,
you like what you like.
Do you get along with the insect people, the people that look
I like the insect people. I actually wanted to be an insect biologist for most of my life, and then I met my current boss, which is a mammologist, and when I moved over to London, he basically said, no, you're going to come work for the mammals.
Yeah, so
and here I am.
In a way, you were poached from insects
Yes, of
to
course,
mammals.
yeah.
Okay.
But I think there's a general affinity of people that work in the museum like most of nature.
Okay, so, okay. All right, interesting. Yeah.
I'd like to ask you if, when you're working with mammals, if you see an insect flying, do you think, I wish I was working with insects right now?
Do you get like
or do you really enjoy mammals now?
Do you get insect FOMO, basically, is the question.
Okay, so specifically when I work in the museum and I work with mammals, the only time I ever see an insect is when there's a pest insect inside the collection and it's eating the skins, and so I don't have a FOMO kind of fear with it. I have oh no, these things are eating all our specimens and we need to do a huge cleanup to get rid of them. So it's but at the same time, when I go overseas and do field trips and I see cool insects, I document them for what I can. And able to work with entomologists later on to work on different parts of science.
What is the coolest insect you've seen?
I think my favorite is something called Atlas moth, and it's one of the largest moth species in the world. It's about this big.
It's growing as well.
It's massive, and they don't have any mouths. So when the juveniles have mouths when they're in the larval stage, but after they pupate and they become adults and they're flying around, they don't have mouths, because that adult form only exists for one purpose, which is reproduction.
Yeah.
It's a giant.
Okay. We didn't get that on the mic. Say that on the mic.
It's a giant sex machine.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a beautiful giant sex machine.
Okay.
And it has this big fat thorax that has the store of fat that allows it to continue living as a sex machine. And eventually, as it lives, this fat storage goes down, and it hopefully propagates, and then it dies.
Okay. So if you're going to be a sex machine, you need a big store of fat. Basically, sorry, what's your name again?
Josh.
Josh, have you got a point about this, a question?
Nothing to say about the sex machine, but I really enjoyed you giving the appraisal of having this collection and what we can learn. I'm just interested if you're aware of any critiques of having this kinds of collections and the flip side of what it means to be having four.
What would you say? What do you mean by the flip side?
I guess there's, I imagine that in the field, there's reasons why it's really good to have lots of collections and to have museums and to have taxonomies and understand the natural world, but I imagine there must be some critiques of this kind of work, this kind of framework, this kind of way of knowing the world and stuff like that. I'm curious.
I feel like we've got this technique turning the mirror, because I feel like you've got something in mind. You've got some kind of idea, but I'm gonna find out what that is. What is the critique?
I think the largest critique that has come up in more recent years is the history of the museum, or the provenance of most of our collections, because as you understand, this museum was a colonial institution. And a lot of our initial collections were made by explorers that were going across the world, setting up colonies and pretty much killing whatever they saw and putting it in a museum over here. And these were largely cabinets of curiosities to begin with. They weren't actually used for large scientific purposes. But I think today, if you look at a lot of the collections that were made within these colonial areas or in developing countries, they don't have as many specimens or a good database of what they have within their countries. So the Natural History Museum becomes a repository for all this knowledge that comes from across the world. And we do collaborate heavily with scientists, and we make our data openly accessible. So I'm from Singapore, and Singapore is an old British colony. It's a Commonwealth country. And I grew up going to the Natural History Museum in Singapore, which was a sister institution to this museum. And now we have partnerships set up between the two museums so that Southeast Asian researchers can have access to all the data and the specimens within the collection over here, and we can tie science together across the world. So there are definitely darker histories within the museum, but I think if anything we can use those histories to make it better moving forward.
Okay, I just want to say for all those standing people, come closer, come and get involved in this conversation, especially those, we've got a few seats around, let's bring it forward, shuffle it forward. At the moment, I guess it's kind of got interesting here. I don't know, Josh, if you've got any sort of reply to that. I mean, what do you think about this question of, a product of colonialization that we're benefiting, but are we benefiting as the whole world, or are we?
Sounds like you have an opinion on it.
But I'm not allowed to give my opinion. I could jump out and let someone go in and then give my opinion. But have you got an opinion on it?
I think it's really interesting that Christian was saying, these institutions started as curiosity cabinets in a particular time in the 19th century, 18th century. They're intimately linked with colonialism, taxonomies, sometimes connected to eugenics. They have very complicated histories. I think the way you round it off is interesting because it's almost like it's a closed book. I feel actually right now loads of people have questions about cultural institutions. The Wellcome Collection is doing a big whole turn the mirror to face in. So now's a really good time to be what are we going to continue to do to address these questions? In what ways do we maybe prop up philosophies of science, kind of the grandeur of the West in some way? In what ways are we still doing that? In what ways are we reckoning with that in a continued way? I mean, I think it's fascinating. It's a great time to be able to doing things like this, opening up the museums, really, really
We're opening up the museum, but is the book of colonialism actually closed? I see some shakes of the head. What do people think? Is that book still being written? Have we closed the book? Have we closed that chapter? What do people think? Someone coming at you? Have we got a point over here? Yep.
Yeah, I think speaking of a book, it would be interesting to see what is not written in the book, because I think Christian was speaking about the library about the museum as a library, which is kind of an archive, and it's people decided what will be represented in the museum. So I think it would be interesting to also question what is not represented.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so it's come from a certain perspective. So what are the things that are missing from that? And anyone want to throw something in? Yeah.
I guess there's something to a philosophy that what's not said is also important, right? So I guess events like this are great to just maybe give the microphone to someone and ask them, what do you think this museum should be?
Yeah. I mean, okay, I'm going to turn the mirror back on you. Joanna, what do you think this museum should be?
Well, I think it should be a collaboration. I think we need to start asking questions, not just in the museum, but in our life, as to I guess, who are we? What are we doing here? And just I started asking.
Definitely feeling that,
and just why? Just why are things the way they are, and what can we do to make them better?
Okay. I mean, could the Natural History Museum study colonialism itself, or is that up to other museums? Is there a colonialism museum?
Every museum is a colonial museum at this point.
So could we turn the sort of microscope of study onto colonialism itself and its effects?
I think there are definitely studies that look at museum collections and the representation within a colonial aspect of where these specimens are coming from and who are they actually being used by. And we are following a trend of making the knowledge and the specimens and the data that we have from areas that were collected in the past, more accessible to the researchers working there.
And what about this question from Timna? This is not just to you, but to anyone. What are we missing? Obviously, that's a particular perspective. What are we missing with that very kind of Western European perspective when they've gone to visit other countries? Do they miss things? Do they gather everything? Does that distort the collection? Josh, I feel like you wanted to come back in on this one. I will say this is a pop-up talk show in which all of you are invited to talk. So we actually, in this case, I think, need contributions, because if we're going to have a different take on it, a different way of doing it, we need to find out what that is. And maybe it's not necessarily down to us, but down to, you know, as me as a white guy, I'm not going to, also, plus I'm in the middle, I'm not supposed to give my opinions, but we need other perspectives on this. So Josh, thank you, Josh. Help me out here.
I just have an opinion, but I find it really fascinating that, like, there's a guy called Galton who used to do, I think he was a naturalist, scientist. He was part of developing the science of eugenics, for example. But like, we look back at science in, like, you know, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and it made mistakes. It was like, it was not a complete idea of knowledge. But like, for some reason, I feel like we've closed the book. It's like the end of questioning science. It's an unquestioning, like, rational science. The scientific method is closed book. It absolutely does what it's supposed to do. It's a kind of Promethean thinking, right? It's like, it's always going forward. It's always going to progress. And I wonder, like, how these institutions prop up that philosophy of science and how that props up climate change, or the inability to tackle climate change. That kind of Promethean thinking, we're always going to have a scientific avenue out of this. Like, why is it a closed book? I'm just interested about that.
Are we as progressive as we think? Is it a closed book? Victor, give us a final thought before you go, and then I'll go over to Joanna. And also, we've got some spare seats. I feel like today it's not just we want you to participate, we need some answers to this as well.
Give that man a raise.
Okay, good on. All right, that's it. And Sasha, have you got a final thought?
I was leaving my seat for...
Okay. Final thought?
I think you made a very good point. I mean, you look back at, like, the Victorians and you realise just how wrong they were about some things.
Yeah.
But we don't apply that same thought to ourselves. Like, how are we going to be wrong? You know?
Yeah. It's easy to look back and realise that the Victorians were wrong, but what mistakes are we making? Where are the gaps in our thinking? In a way, it is a difficult question, because how do we know what our blind spots are when they're our blind spots? So, but anyway, people, come forward. We need some participation around the table. As we're going to give you a round of applause just to encourage you. Okay, and Josh, stay there because we need you particularly. We particularly need you. And who have we got around the table? Let's get some. So we've got Christian, we have got Margot, we've got Asha, we have got Timna, we have got
Sitana.
Sitana, that's right. We've got Joanna, we've got Larice, and we've got
Hilmi.
Yep. And
Helena.
Sheetal.
So where are we going to go with this conversation? We don't have to go so heavy. Maybe I feel like we've gone a little bit. We went from farting dinosaurs to rewriting, the history of colonialism. But we can do something in between. It's kind of up to you. Where do you want to take this conversation? Any thoughts about? Yeah.
I've got 2 points. One is, as we were talking about different ways of cooking dinosaurs, I'd quite like to see an NHM branded cookbook.
Yeah.
Like cooking suggestions of all the extinct species. Just get famous or not so famous cooks on it and just see what they come up with. But the second point was about what is the perspective they were getting from museum being, I don't know, maybe arranged by the colonizers and that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm from Eastern Europe, and recently an AI has been asked, I think it was the image generating AI being asked to visualize, I think, Eastern Europe, and it was just so funny how it visualized like Leonardo DiCaprio looking a little bit like Lenin with like a goatee, and it's like Kevin from Home Alone, he's kind of like running through like bleak streets with like blocks of flats and that kind of stuff, and it is funny, and it's kind of like, oh look, this is kind of like a vaguely famous person impersonating or kind of like standing in for this generic Eastern European, but I think it really kind of distorts the truth, but kind of provokes the conversation. But I do think we have to keep on feeding voices so that image, that collection is different. So
in a way that's a sort of reflection of whatever that kind of mainstream thought is, whatever the world kind of bubble, internet bubble, thinks Eastern Europe is like. Well, there are tower blocks in Eastern Europe. And
Paris,
yeah,
you know, even bigger ones, even bleaker ones.
So is it the same thing when it comes to lots of other cultures and spaces?
I think I kind of agree because, like, when it comes to, I'm from Sri Lanka, and a lot of the times there's stereotypes of how I should be, but it's completely wrong because if you come to Sri Lanka, we're not all like how they picture us to be.
How is it pictured? What is the sort of stereotype?
Like, I don't know, when I go to museums and stuff and I see Sri Lanka, it's very much they show us like as farmers and agriculture, but there was a lot more. There were like royal families that ruled over land and stuff. And I think it's that kind of story because in like the way it worked was like Britain came over and then they like, the way I looked at it is Britain came over, took a lot of other stuff, came back and then said the story that they want to say. Whereas the stories that actually happened aren't really spoken out too much. Like in Bollywood recently, there's been a lot of movies coming out where they're speaking on the vision of where it is from India or like from Sri Lanka, like how we viewed it. And I think that's where the difference comes in because sometimes I read books in British history and I'm like, that's not Sri Lanka.
So it's like a really weird perspective of where you're actually from. Has anyone else got that kind of thing? No, you haven't said anything yet, so you take priority. What's your name again?
Helena.
Helena, that's right,
So it's fascinating, and I really like the idea that you were saying about stories and the stories that we're told. So my background's in eco-linguistics, which really looks at how language shapes our perception and interaction with the world. And there's this writer called Ben Okri who basically says that stories are the secret reservoirs of our values. So if you want to change and bring about ecological, social justice or any form of change in the world, you change the stories by which people live. And when you do that, you fundamentally change their values.
Okay, so it's actually, we've got all these objects in the museum, and maybe this is an answer to the question that maybe it's the way we tell stories about those objects.
I think so, and it's the bigger story. It's not just like the small stories, but the big stories about consumerism and, you know, buy the big house, have the big car, buy more and more, and unbound economic growth. But when you think about the museum as well, for me, most museums kind of tell the story of what's extinct, what's dead, what's been taken, what's gone. And I think shifting that to kind of finding a balance about, well, yes, but what's living and what's here and how can we focus on regeneration? Because Mauritius has a similar story. When you think of it, it's like coasts and blue seas and these amazing lands. But we gave the world the idiom as dead as a dodo. Because it was just a land of destruction, like, you know, devastation. But that's not the story that's sold. The story is like, come, it's a rainbow nation. And I think also for museums, and maybe the Natural History Museum, it's finding that balance of, yes, there's all of this wealth of knowledge and wisdom, but how do we also include people and encourage people to shift towards harmony and growth and regeneration, building on these disasters of the past? So,
Okay, definite round of applause for that, and you're actually getting a real one as well. People come forward because, you know, if we're going to tell these new stories, we need you around the table. You may not have the whole story, but you've definitely got part of the story. So we've got some spare seats around here. As I said, this is not a spectator sport, so come forward, get involved. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but you've got more chance of saying something if you're actually sitting around this table. We're talking about stories. How do we create these new stories or better stories? Satana.
Just on the point of stories, because you know, we're talking about colonial lens of like museums, and I mean, I think it's a good point Tim raised about the Wellcome Collection, who are doing that actually fairly well, and that they're retelling the story of Henry Wellcome, who had a lot of privilege and a lot of money to tell his story of how, but now they're saying this is a story that he hasn't told, and I think that's kind of also important for museums to take ownership and be honest and be humble and say actually, like, there's a darker side to it, and I think I haven't really seen that here, and I think that's quite important to do. So kind of that's one thing I think, that's in terms of stories, who's telling the stories, and you know.
I mean, is it about the museum telling a kind of humble, shameful story, or is it about developing new stories or new narratives or other perspectives, stories from other perspectives?
I think it's about honesty. So it's not about telling shameful stories. It's just tell the truth, and you know that's kind of where you should kind of start with. I think.
Okay, tell the truth.
Yeah.
All right. Where do we want to take this? Come people forward. As I said, once again, I think this is also about participation, especially you, Josh, because you kicked it all off. You kicked it all off. Now see what you've done. Joanna.
I just wanted to also add that the problem is time, right? Like we die. Sorry to make it like super gloomy, but like we live and things stay, and like what is staying behind? It's like, do you know when you're a kid and you do the telephone game, and then it starts as a thing, and then
What is a
ends.
telephone game?
It's like you say something on someone's phone, and it goes all around the table. At the end, it's something completely different.
Yeah, it's what. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know. We call it telephone game
We
in Portugal.
call it Chinese whispers, but actually it's a very un-PC. It's a very un-PC.
Yeah, telephone game where I came
from. We know what to call it now, so that's excellent that we've got
something for you to take home. It's kind of about like things stay and like what do they mean, because meanings change and like everything changes and people change and everything changes, and it's like the things that stay behind have to be truthful because they can always be misinterpreted.
Okay.
Right? I guess it depends on people as well.
Okay, there is.
Sorry, just.
Yeah, and I think to tie both of the points up, I mean, when people are gone, it's the stories that are left behind, and I think that's why it's so important that they're honest, and that they're reflective of history and what happened, whenever the time was. Honesty is important, stories are important, and it would be great if different kind of people got to tell stories. I think we have quite a similar narrative and a similar kind of type of person telling a story, so it'd be really great if we can have stories of just from loads of different people.
Okay, who would you like to have telling a story? And we'll try and find them tonight and get them to tell the story.
Why not have more stories from people of Sri Lanka? Tamil stories. See, there you go. All over the gaff.
Okay, is it just Sri Lanka, or should we just, can we widen it out to other parts of the world?
We can start with Sri Lanka.
Okay, Joanna, you obviously have to give us a final thought before you go.
My final thought is, people, please come sit down at this table and say what you think and tell your story.
Maybe we just need to hear some stories. Does anyone want to tell us a story? Anyone brave enough to volunteer a story? It's definitely.
I can do the story.
You're going to do a story.
So going back to your point just now, when you were saying that you said that the focus of the museum is largely on things that have been dead. I mean, that's the entire premise of this museum. We have millions and millions of dead things across it.
The Dead Creatures Museum.
The Dead Zoo. I say the Dead Zoo is a good one.
Okay,
but I think for me at least, I work on extant animals, and a lot of our collection here, I think a lot of people, when they think of the Naturalist Museum, they think about dinosaurs or animals that are no longer here. But a large majority of our collection is actually animals that are still that were alive within recent time and might still be alive today. So to give an example, my research is currently working on the restoration and the conservation of tropical freshwater systems. But I use the collection extremely heavily here because all these dead animals that were found within the area that I'm working in, some of them are no longer there.
Can you give us an example of some of the animals?
There are loads of different species of frogs and fish and the tigers that would be, so I'm working in an area in Cambodia, and the area that I'm working in is somewhere called the Cardamom Mountains, and there used to be wild tigers and leopards that roam around there, but we don't see them anymore. But the records of those animals existing within these areas are found within natural history museums. And from the specimens that are held within these collections, can we tell about where they were, what their genetic makeup was, and they can feed into understandings of how can we reintroduce these animals and repair and restore our environments that we're living in today. And I think actually a lot of my colleagues and the people that I work with are working on issues like that, but it's just not very well known.
I mean, just from Helena's perspective, should you start with the idea of repairing and restoring,
Yes.
Rather than the death and destruction and the extinction.
I think it comes all together. I mean,
Yeah.
the multiple facets to it, and the death and destruction, as dark as it was when the collection was being created, is giving us a lot of information on how to repair our world today.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's a great story. We'll definitely have a round of applause for Christian there. Any other stories? It doesn't have to be, that's a big one and that's a good one, but it's a bit like doing the karaoke.
Light stories?
Well, we could have a light story. I want to get, if someone does too good a song on karaoke, then no one else is willing to come. So, what we want is actually just a bit of a feeble story. So everyone else goes, I can do a better story than that. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah. I'm just kind of toying with this idea because we're talking about mortality as like, you can only tell your story whilst you're alive, and then when you're dead, that's it. And also Joanna, she's gone now, but who is kind of looking after what the mainstream story is being told through institutions like museum. And I wonder if there are people who are like really like telling good stories, or their voice is valued and represents something to people. I think actually maybe these people should be just taken under some kind of, I don't know, a wing of, I don't know, scientists or something, just to preserve their life, just like keep them going. Like their life is just too valuable for them to like, just smoke cigarettes or just like, I don't know, just do stupid stuff. Their life should be preserved because they then become like a vital voice.
Like sample people.
Yeah, like if you're too clever, or like if you're very, very clever, you need to be immortalized. That's what should be happening, I think.
Okay, should
somehow.
we be preserving humans, significant humans? We've got a new face to the table. Tell us your name.
Hello, I'm Raja, and I'd love to tell a story if I may.
Yes, let me just hit the round of applause. Let's have a round of applause as well, yeah.
This is a short story about telling stories.
Yeah.
Somebody once said to me, how do you find out the good story to tell?
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that was. So I went and asked my master storyteller, how do I tell the best story? And he said, you have to follow the archer.
Yeah.
I said, what's the archer? He said, well, there's a story about an archer who wanted to be a master archer. Always shoot the arrow in the middle of the target. And they went off around, they went to one village and then another village and another village. And everywhere they went, they said, can you please find me the person who show me to shoot the best arrow?
Yeah.
And they all said, no, I don't know, nobody here, whatever. And then he comes to a village, and there he can see on the door of the main hall an arrow in the middle of a target. And he thought, this is the place where I'm going to find the master archer. By that time it was getting a bit late and he was feeling a little bit tired and hungry, so he went and sat under a tree to have his sandwiches. And this little girl comes along with a bow and arrow. She's just playing with a bow and arrow. And she takes her bow and she shoots the arrow into the tree. And then she comes up to the tree, puts her hand in her pocket, gets out a bit of chalk and draws a target around the arrow. And the principle of this story is that there is no right story. Tell any story that you can and your audience will make it hit the target.
Okay, good one, Roger. So there's no right story, there's just stories. Are there better stories, worse stories? Are there stories which can lead us out of the kind of mess we're in? Larisse?
I think I might disagree. What if the story's boring? What if you tell a story and everyone falls asleep?
Yeah.
I feel like then you failed.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so we definitely need to be entertaining in this storytelling, certainly not worried about objectivity.
But then the question goes, how far would you exaggerate a story to make it interesting? Because if your story is boring and you want people to listen, but you know it's boring, you might add things to spice it up and exaggerate it. So there comes that little argument of like, how can we say if this story is the real story or if it's the exaggerated version? So
okay. Does that lead us to the more dramatic stories? Helena?
I also just wanted to add on that in terms of like stories, there are
the bigger kind of archetypal stories that influence us as well. So the stories that we get told about, for example, nothing can be done, we're all heading towards doom and gloom, like what's the point? But then you have spaces like this, which I think encourage people to have a voice and have a place. And there are so many movements and organizations and charities and activists and conservationists and scientists and artists who are shifting things on a very local level. But it's just about how do you platform that so that it has accessibility. And I think that's the biggest thing, is if you want change in a positive direction, it's making information and these bigger stories accessible to people. So nights like this, I think, are really fantastic, because it allows people to see things from a different perspective. Because I know talk about regeneration and reparation is a bit difficult, given that the whole premise of the museum is about like dead things. But it allows for like a kind of convergence of new stories to emerge, hopefully, and people to walk away from it thinking, oh, my mind's changed about something, and maybe there's something on a more immediate level that I can do that could help me on a like individual level connect with nature, and not think that we're all heading towards destruction, and there's no point in me trying to change. It's about those little ways of changing values, I think.
Okay, so you can tell better stories for people to connect with nature. I just want to say, connecting with this, do come forward. We've got a whole bunch of seats here. Even if you've got nothing to say, like, come and sit, come closer to us. It's turned into the storytelling circle. Give these people a round of applause for being brave. We've got one seat here. Someone gonna come. Yes, tell us your name.
Amelia.
So thank you for coming forward, Amelia. At the moment we're talking about telling stories. What is that power of telling stories? Are you going, Helena?
Yeah, someone else can take the chair.
Okay, well, we definitely want a final thought from you before you go. If you're just standing back, it looks like we lost Josh on this one, because people sneak away when they're like on the second row. But we're talking about telling stories, and we're talking about changing the narrative, I suppose. You mentioned as well, Helena, like this idea of connecting with nature through the story, and connecting different people with nature, rather than maybe, those kind of Victorian explorers, maybe a new cohort of people. Larry, you're something to say here.
I wanted to agree with what Helena was saying, and a little bit more about the concept of a story, that there is no boring story. It really depends on the storyteller. Because if the person really knows how to put the words, and make it interesting.
Do you think a storyteller could make the most boring facts a good story?
Absolutely. I fully agree. Like even a story about like what color socks I put in the morning. I'm sure there is someone who can make it incredibly fascinating and
I've got a story about that, but I'm in the middle, so I can't
you can't share it. But what I wanted to say from what I heard you guys saying around the table and people who work here in the museum, you really know how to engage with people and how to make the story interesting. And this is really the key for educating kids and young adults, and really make them want to be a part of, nature and science and biology and all this kind of stuff. Because I remember from school, I'm not from UK, so I guess it's different. But when I was in school and we would go to the museum or gallery, I honestly, every time I was falling asleep sitting on the floor, because I couldn't take the boring history facts that were nothing interesting.
Right.
So I'm glad to see that those things are changing now.
It's been livened up a little bit. Yes, it definitely has. So that's good in itself. Ashley, we've got a point from you over there.
One thing. Do we have a final thought?
Oh yes, well spotted. You're doing my job, so you cannot sneak away without a final thought. Satana, give us a final thought.
I agree that more nights like this are great, and let more people tell their stories. I think, definitely.
Okay, I mean, do you agree with this idea that any boring facts, any difficult facts could be made interesting through the skill of storytelling?
Yeah, I do. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a skill, and I think, I mean, I work in science and research and with a lot of boring stuff as well, so I
Could it
hope
be
so.
made interesting with a good storyteller?
What
are you researching?
It's not very boring. I work in pain management research, I guess, but
yeah. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think so.
Not too painful?
Can be. We have a pain procedure room.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well, okay. That sounds really scary to me. Okay. Thank you, Satana. But let's just have a round of applause just to get the vibe going, the atmosphere. Someone sneaked away over here as well. That was Laura. She's doing the. Asher.
On the topic of storytelling, it's been mentioned earlier about how making the storytelling process accessible for all people. And one thing I think when I attempt to tell a story is I don't to follow a script. So whenever I do a speech or anything like that, I don't do a script. I just write stuff down. I'm like, I'm going to do whatever I can. Just
and you go freeform.
Yeah, I've done 3 best man speeches.
Yeah.
I can do anything.
Yeah.
But like as Laura was saying earlier about socks in the morning, was it? I can't remember what it was. There is a way you can string a story out of it. Like your journey to choosing that sock, why that colour, why that material of sock. There's so many aspects of the sock, this metaphorical sock you could call it, they could bring out.
Yeah, well, as long as you don't get cold feet when it comes to telling a story.
No, it just reminds me, I was sick last week and I was watching Harry and Meghan documentary on Netflix, don't judge me. And speaking of drawing out a story, I mean, man, it was like 6 episodes, but really and truly, if they took out all the endless gaps in between bits, it would have been just 1 episode. So
okay, so you
but
can
6 episodes, man.
The point being, you can make a story out of anything, basically. Okay, Christian, are you ready? We're going to have a little bit of a change now, but let's just get these couple of points, and then we're going to have a change of host. We're going to change the narrative. It was all part of the plan, but let's just get a couple of points, Amelia, and then.
Yeah, oh, sorry, that was loud. I don't know what I missed, but I feel like this is the perfect room to talk about that. What was the first story? Well, a picture paints 1,000 words. A long time ago, we were painting pictures of nature on caves to communicate with, our fellow people that this is what we're going after, this is what we're hunting, this is the nature around us.
So in a way, nature is the starting point.
It's the starting point of all of this, and we're sat surrounded by these beautiful pictures that tell stories that we couldn't possibly begin to describe in such an eloquent way. And I think nights like this are so important, but so is all the art that comes out of it, the music, every single thing that just is another way of describing this almost unique but innate human feeling that we have to connecting to nature.
Okay, great point. So it should be fairly easy to tell some of these stories in a different way. Let's just get a final point from you, and then we're going to have a change of hosts. And I do want to say, this guy, I've been training him to do this job, but he's only had 1 session. So come forward, be excited, be enthusiastic, help him out. Give us your point.
Okay, I was just going to say that stories change anyway. So traditionally, before people, like the vast majority of people, learned to read and write, stories were told orally, and they evolved just because of different vocabulary or interpretations or anything like that. But to add to the point you made about picture languages, even that has changed. So, for example, in the past, those pictures represented a word. Nowadays, they might represent a sound rather than a word, and that word has faded, or the original meaning has faded. So I think stories,
they evolve.
Yeah, they evolve naturally, and that's just the way they've always been, whether it's written or spoken. And if you think about written language, when they're translated, Harry Potter or anything that's been written and translated, it changes a little bit anyway, just because the language is not the same. So I think evolution in stories is inevitable.
That's an interesting point, and maybe we could also, obviously we talk a lot about evolution here in the Natural History Museum, so maybe, do we talk about the evolution of stories or the evolution of values and concepts? That could be something we carry on. I'm going to jump on the outside. Let me just give us a sound check, hang on. Have I unmuted you? Try now. Yes.
We're good.
Okay, so stick that in your pocket.
All right.
This is an experiment, so keep it warm for Christian. Keep
it light. Let's keep it light, guys.
Just get everyone's name and then just ask them where they want to.
You want me to introduce Talkaoke?
Didn't want it.
And let's just give a huge round of applause to Mikey.
Hey, so welcome to Talkaoke. I am your new host, Christian. I am as an introduction, I'm a PhD researcher in the museum. I haven't done this before, but what Talkaoke is, it's a discussion panel where the public is allowed to engage and we can talk about any subject around the sun. Obviously, we're in the Natural History Museum today, so if you want to use that as a jumping off point, we can. But let's start with getting names from the people around the table.
Sheetal, yeah. Mia.
Mia.
Amelia.
Amelia.
Hilmi.
Hilmi.
Louise.
Darcy.
Raja.
Lloyd.
Timna.
Asha.
Margot.
Mikey.
And that is our panel for today. So let us start the discussion off with Mikey. You have been a great host. What would you like to talk about?
I mean, I love this. I love this discussion. I think it's a really, really good discussion. I particularly, I think we need to go on a journey of imagination. Even though we're talking about hard facts, I sort of believe that actually it's how you see those things. It's how you see this rhinoceros on the wall. There's so many different interpretations just from a picture of a rhinoceros. So I would like to hear more stories. I don't know. I'm from a little suburban town called Gravesend, where we call woodlice cheesy bugs. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was just a name for them until I discussed woodlice with other people not from Gravesend, yep. And I discovered that's not the case. So I think that's just one tiny silly example of how we see and describe things differently.
Mm-hmm. So people have different narratives with different opinions, but yes.
Mikey, why were they called cheesy bugs?
I've literally no idea. We need to ask the eco. Well, Helena, tell us about how language evolves. And I don't know. The eco-linguist might have an answer. I have no idea. I don't know why things are called what they're called. Maybe they are cheesy if you squash them or something like that. I don't know.
So, anyone else have experiences that they have found out something that has overturned their world or their understanding of anything else?
I mean, it just made me think of, for instance, there's a big kind of discussion in Polish language right now about, it's not about pronouns, but it's about feminine ending to some of the words, because we do have like masculine, feminine, and neutral. And people just getting the knickers in a twist about it. It's like, oh no, you can't call a female judge, whatever, judgess or whatever to abbreviated. But actually the truth is these feminative forms existed at the beginning of the century. That was just a norm. And I think it's just so funny how, that use of language is like, oh no, this is like some kind of feminist agenda, how the language has become weaponized or antagonizing for other people. So yeah.
So antagonizing language. Anyone have thoughts on anything like that? Please.
Sorry. I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I'll make another point. I was thinking about if I could say that here, but I'm just going to say it. I was in a rehearsal a couple of years ago, and my mother tongue is German. And so two of my colleagues, they were improvising a scene, and it was about what I in German would call sodomy. But sodomy in German doesn't mean sodomy, what you call in English sodomy. Sodomy means, what's the word in English when you have sex with an animal?
Bestiality.
Yeah, so sodomy in German means bestiality. So I was like, I think we were discussing actually the scene, and I was saying, I think we should not maybe show in this kind of on this stage and this scenario, we should not speak about sodomy, and complete silence. And then someone tried to, Tina, what is so bad about sodomy? And I was like, and then when I explained what I think about bestiality, they were like, oh yeah, that's something different. So I just wanted to say, kind of what things say and can be different in different words and ways. Yeah.
So Asha, as you're leaving, please give us a final thought.
Everyone has very different perspectives of things. I mean, we're going on the story of woodlouse and cheesy burgers. Apparently everyone says tooth, I say tooth. Is that a Brummie thing? I don't know. We'll never find out.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So along the subject of things that are misconstrued or... Yes, please, before you leave.
Tomato. That's all
right, tomato. Yeah, that's good. Yes, Laura.
on that thought about the tomato and the differences in languages, what's with the word pineapple when all the other countries in Europe call it ananas? Why is it pineapple just in English? Why? Anybody knows? Anybody is a linguistic here?
Anyone in the crowd with that knowledge? No? Yes.
No, I don't know anything about pineapples, but I will ask you a similar question about a certain fat bird that we like to eat at Christmas. Turkey, but it doesn't come from Turkey. It actually comes from Middle America. It was a bird that came with Christopher Columbus's crowd back here. And he thought he'd been to India. So when it got here, the French thought it was dindon. It comes from India. So the French say it comes from India. The English say it comes from Turkey. The Turks actually also think it comes from India, because it was never their bird anyway. And the Arabs think it comes from Ethiopia, and the North Africans think it comes from Romania. If you look at the language for this bird, it refers to a different source country. Nobody ever calls it the Mexican bird, which is actually where it came from.
Nice. Thank you for that. So, anyone to lead on with that?
I have something.
Yes.
So it's the same thing with cashmere silk. For the longest time in my life, I thought it came from the Indian state, well, let's just say the state of Kashmir. I don't want to open the state of Kashmir. And I researched it, and apparently it comes from sheep in Afghanistan, I think it was. And I thought, all my life, I thought it was from Kashmir because it had the same name. But it's, yeah, like it really depends on like a language. And there's like, I think there's a curry called Kashmiri curry as well, and that's not from Kashmir. And I was like, is my life a lie? But yeah, it's very much like the Turkey story, where it's like you think it's from somewhere because of the name and the language, but it's completely not. It's completely from somewhere else. So yeah, I agree with the whole Turkey thing and the other languages having different things, but yeah.
So yes.
I was going to say that I feel the same about tea, coffee, chocolate. Like people say Italian coffee, but it's never grown in Italy. They call it Indian tea because it's got spice, but not because the tea is from India. It could actually be East African tea, which is where the majority of the tea in this country comes from. And chocolate is never Belgian or Swiss. It's, you know, African or maybe South American or, I don't know, wherever cocoa is grown. Mexico as well. So I feel the same. It really confused me when I first came to this country. Like, why is it called Indian tea and, you know, Italian coffee and things like that?
Yes.
So I feel like we're going to get a little bit philosophical, but I feel like as humans, we kind of lump all of our sort of ideas and words into like little sort of boxes in our mind. We sort of create sort of ideas for everything that exists. But the actual fact is, reality is so nuanced. There's so much grey within the black and white. And I feel like that is often where all of this confusion comes in, like with this like sort of misinterpreting like where things come from. Because in actual fact, like going back to the stories, we're all like a collection of different stories. Like stories are how we connect with each other. They're sort of what we tell about ourselves. They're how we create our perceptions in the world. And like anything can happen. Literally anything. Like that is just how the world works. So for us to like create specific definitions for everything, put everything in little boxes, is almost just like dichotomy. It's like, well, why are we doing that? Like, because that's just, I guess, human nature in a way. But it's very philosophical, sort of a passing thought. But yeah.
Thank you for that. So we have someone new joining the table. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Sarah.
And Sarah, do you have anything to say against these points that you heard so far?
Not against, but what I want to say is, that said, it is important to recognize origins, because the global north is really great at, you know, just lumping everything and labeling it as their own. And if not before, I think in 2023 the time has come to identify things where they come from, not say things like chai tea, not say things like naan bread, you know. naan is bread. So you're basically saying bread. And chai is tea, so you're basically saying tea.
Yes. A point from here first.
I was just going off what Mia said when she was saying about stories and how the language can have different interpretations. This is just a bit silly, but when I was little, like my mind was like blown when we learned in English a sentence that would be like, I stole my mother's watch, or I didn't steal my mother's watch, and then it would be like, I didn't steal my mother's watch. I didn't steal my mother's watch. I didn't steal my mother's watch. And like how like language, you can add like different influxes on each word, and it like completely changes the story. Like I didn't steal my mother's watch. Just silly, just crazy.
So all these, hold on, back to your point. So all these misinterpretations, all of your stories so far have been quite personal or culturally personal. Do we think that these misinterpretations of stories or words or objects leads into larger effects within our society? Anyone for thoughts for that? Yes, Mikey.
I think the issue is that there is only really culturally personal, and so this idea that there is this great objective understanding of the world, it might be true in physics, but it's not true in our lives. And I think that is the great problem that we're dealing with, is that this supposedly neutral view, objective view is actually a Western European view, and which is why we're having all these problems about the naan bread and stuff like that. Because, you know, there is no actual... Yeah, we've all got our own personal stories, and actually that's how we construct our world. You know, even if we're scientists, most of the things we think about ourselves are about the stories that kind of build it all up for us.
Anyone to add on for that? Yes.
Yeah, coming back to your question, Christian, I think I lost train of thought. Oh no.
Thinking about how
the misunderstanding. Thank you. The misinterpretation. It happens actually quite often to me, like being, I think, misinterpreted because also like kind of a language barrier. But I think it's so important, like, to ask, and I think this is sometimes what I'm missing. Like if sometimes I'm not sure if I'm understanding the other person in the right way, but actually I can just ask, and I think. My point is I would love to see more people asking, do I understand it in the right way, how you want to say it, yeah.
So it's about being more open with everything, then?
I don't know.
Sorry. Yes, please.
Just sort of building off of that, I feel like the way that social media is sort of influencing society at the moment is leading everyone towards like extreme polarization, sort of with the algorithm only sort of showing people things that they're already interested in, so that they think that's their one point of view. And so I feel like this sort of concept of openness and being able to ask and question and inquire into sort of like, is this right? Is my belief right? Or are there other beliefs that I'm not missing? Are there other sort of views that I could inquire into and maybe like question like my own sort of, and really just curiosity, I think, is a big sort of thing that we need to sort of evolve towards a much more uniting sort of society, I guess.
Thank you. Great. Hold on, we have some new faces here. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Rianka.
Nice to meet you. Please, final thought before you leave.
Sorry, I have to go because I've signed up for a tour, but thank you. This was really interesting.
I thought along the discussions that you've heard so far.
I think this is quite common, just like the story thing. I think there's a river in the UK, or definitely in England, which has some Scandinavian name originally, and then the English, then you call it river, so technically it's a river. I can't remember which one it is, but I think it's somewhere in the north. Do you know which one, Raj? Oh, okay, so there you go. So we do it in this country as well. It's not just like naan bread or...
Learn something every day. And a new face over here. Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Rod.
Rod? All right. So we're talking about misidentification. Oh, right, we had a point here.
So just to add to her point, I'm like a firm believer of learning from your mistakes. So if you make a mistake, because especially with social media nowadays, if you do a mistake, there's like a huge crowd that'll jump on you and probably cancel you. And to me, I'll be honest, I was one of them at the beginning, but I've learned that now it's better, instead of canceling someone, is to take them to a side and kind of educate them on why it was wrong and what they can do to better themselves or to learn or to understand. So for me, it's very much like, if someone does something wrong, it's rather than penalizing them, we should like kind of think and be like, you know what? You were wrong because you probably didn't understand. So let me help you clarify and understand why it was wrong and how you could correct it the next time.
So bringing this homogenization of society back together and making sure that everyone has open knowledge and is talking to each other. Yes.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think it's about a willingness to learn and being open and open-minded and kind of understanding and realizing that everyone's going to make mistakes, and you just got to hold yourself accountable and yeah, be ready to learn.
Yes?
I do agree with the point that the stories are really nuanced, and I sometimes feel like when I first moved to this country, and people were like, oh, you're Polish just like our nanny, or like, oh, like our plumber. I was like, no, I'm a distinct person. You know, there's more to Poland, the Polish identity, than what you think, the stereotype or whatever. So here I was thinking like, I'm doing such a good job, just like bringing nuance into what people think of Polish people in the UK. And then, I think 2016, Eurovision, Poland has put on this band. They didn't win, but they just like reinforced all the stupid fucking stereotypes. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, but I do sometimes think, like, in advertising of different countries, I think, you know, yeah, diversity, yeah, different stories. But when it comes down to it, we, you know, the big bodies like state, like a country, or like a, you know, they do use broad brushstrokes, just because it's like, oh yeah, India, oh chai tea, naan bread, you know, you just kind of go for the big ones, something that kind of triggers something like general in people's minds. You know, if you're talking about like advertising your country, like making money, then you're not going to go into nuance. Like, it's not profitable.
1 second, please. Someone, please come closer around. Please, someone join this discussion panel. Anyone?
A bit of a recap of the conversation so far.
So we are talking about the representation of stories within our society, how different names are misconstrued, how we misidentify things at times, and how does this affect the society that we live in today. Yeah. So please, anyone, Josh, please join the discussion panel for 5 minutes.
Help this guy out.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, you had a point.
I lost my chain of thought, but just to support what she was saying, also all of these things and conceptions get drawn into things like immigration policy, you know, where the assumption is that certain people from a certain part of the world are taking away our jobs, are taking away our spaces. So those broad brushstrokes, while they may just be conceptions and opinions and stereotypes, they're stereotypes for a reason, and that reason is that everybody's starting to think that way and judge that way. Yep. And it really makes its way into politics and the system, and just trickles down from there. So it's not as innocuous as, you know, just someone's opinion or story.
Okay. So we have two new faces here. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Justin.
My name's Josh.
So going on your point that these stereotypes work our way into society and into our industries and into the ways that we live. How can we solve these issues then of misunderstandings and misinterpretations?
I think the issue comes when it's appropriation rather than appreciation. It's sort of like taking all of these things about people's different cultures and putting a negative spin on it, and exactly like what you said, like saying stuff about immigration, bringing in politics and sort of using the stereotypes to better agendas and to like push for like different propagandas and that sort of thing. Because there is a difference between sort of celebrating culture and using aspects of culture to put people down. And and I just say, I think the sort of solution to that is to just be so like mindful about the things that we say, about the assumptions that we hold, and the preconceptions that we have sort of about cultures, and to sort of like re-establish those preconceptions and sort of like in a way unlearning, because all of these things are programmed into us through literally just nurture, because the way we live already sort of in this society, in this place. So yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I think Mikey had his hand up first.
No, I just wanted to, I was going to make a different point, but I think the point about culture and appropriation, I personally believe in culture. I don't believe in putting cultures down, but I think we should be taking elements from other cultures that we like and incorporating them into our own. I think the problem comes when you take the credit for that, or you don't actually refer to the source. But I think if we didn't appropriate other cultures, we'd be kind of lost and isolated. Mm-hmm. And culture is a living, dynamic thing. It's not static. It is informed by history, but it's actually us making culture that is more important to me.
From my understanding, it seems like culture has developed largely from the appropriation of other cultures over a long period of time.
I think it's intermeshed into people, but not appropriation. It's important to define appropriation here. There are people, I'll give a very pop cultural example. Gwen Stefani, for example, appropriated Japanese culture and profited off of it. When she was done with the Harajuku phase, those dancers went off and nobody knows what happened to them. So, that's what appropriation is. For example, a white person wearing cornrows, that's appropriation. That's not okay, because there is a reason where cornrows came from, and many, many times there were, I don't want to speak for black people again, but there's a reason why that should be done, and why that was done, why that was followed. So yes, appropriation and appreciation are two very different things. If you're using something from part of a culture to celebrate that culture while you're with people of those cultures, it's very different. And if you're using that to profit off of that image and appear cool, then that's a very different thing. But that said, I do think that cultures come about from people mixing with each other. So I think the appropriation thing is it's a different topic. And it should not be, I don't think it should be blended so conveniently with unity and appreciating each other. I think those are two very different topics.
All right. Have you something to add on from here?
Yeah, just adding on from what you were just saying, I think what's often missed is the systemic aspect of why it's bad to appropriate something like cornrows or a bindi or something like that, because it's like, while Kylie Jenner or somebody can wear cornrows and appear really cool and really hip, black women are not being given jobs because their hair is too messy, or people are being bullied for expressing their own religion and stuff like that. So it's like, as utopian as it would be to just take all these cultures and just live in this like very like blended society, we're not there yet, and we like have a lot of work to do before we get to a point where we can just take everything and make it our own and blah blah blah.
I was going to ask that question before. Yes.
We need to dismantle racism, which is not a... Yeah. More than this conversation can do.
But to start this sort of...
Sorry, I'm supposed to be...
To start this re-education or this larger understanding of how we can tackle these larger problems, what do we think are the facets within society that are the most easily the points of society that this can be most easily tackled in? Yes.
I wasn't going to specifically answer that question,
Please
but I was going to.
Any question you like.
I was going to talk about appreciation versus appropriation, and that sometimes people can get confused, but I think it's quite simple. And I was thinking about it, and I was wondering. I think it's quite akin to writing an essay. If you write an essay, you have to cite your sources. And if you don't cite your sources, then it's plagiarism. And I think that's what we should do. We should think about it as an essay. You'd never just, copy and paste or write something and not credit so on and so forth. So I think that's what's important. Appreciation is citing your sources and saying, yeah, I got it from this paper. What they've done in their work and their experiment's really great. And then if you don't cite,
then that's appropriation, and that's wrong.
The scientific method, I love it. Go on.
Adding on to the scientific method, another thing is that we're seeing a lot in our world right now is that people are woke enough to know all the right words in the language, but not woke enough to actually, do what needs to be done to untie these issues. So there's a lot of, DEI, EDI happening, but not a lot of it actually making a difference. So diversity and inclusion, yeah. So that is also another thing that needs to be untied, I think.
But we're talking a lot about untying it, but how exactly is this pushed? Is this pushed through educating people when young or educating people when they're a little bit older? Mikey?
I just want to go to this point about dismantling racism, because I'd quite like to dismantle racism. I see tonight as a good starting point for that. But, what would that actually mean? I do sort of agree with you. It's not just about talking the talk, but, maybe talking about it as a starting point for dismantling racism. I see the group of people around here, the minds, as good minds to sort of put on that job of how we actually do it.
Yes.
So coming back also to the storytelling and dismantling racism, let me tell you a story about my niece. She is now 10 years old, and so she's of mixed color, and she's 10 years old, and she actually asked my sister, so her mom, she wants to look like her best friends, which are white in Austria or in her class, and she's super sad because she would like to have the same skin, and she also says, I never can be an actress because they're all white. So it also starts which stories are told and by whom and when, and this is one answer to the question which you how could we start to dismantle. I think who is allowed to tell which story when and why, and
All right, so we're going to go to people that we haven't heard before.
So I'm in my 50s and Mike is in his 50s, and sorry. Well, you're kind of the same generation as me, but the point I'm trying to make is that when you take the long view, if you look at the last 40 years, let's say, things were very different 40 years ago in terms of racism. You had the National Front and the language and everything. It was very different. And if you just look at over time, you do see there's been big changes. Now, it may well be that those changes still have to happen. The changes still have to happen, but it does happen. It may not be fast enough, but it does happen. And I see this in young people, how much more aware they are than we were when I was their age. It does change over time through education and so on. It may change more slowly than you want it to, but it does change, and it's changing all the time. I see that.
We're going to get to you after.
I'm also talking about destructuring everything. For me, I come from a brown family, and I've kind of grown up with my mum and dad telling me to lighten my skin and be fair. And it's one of those things where recently it's opened up a lot of debate in my family, because I will sit there and I'll be like, I'm proud of being brown, and I'm proud to go out in the sun and get even darker if I have to. It shouldn't be something I should be ashamed of. But when I go to my parents and I talk to where this things came from, I think it roots back to how for in Sri Lanka, the beauty standard is very much what the West is. It's very much fair skin, the blonde hair, the blue eyes. And for people in Sri Lanka, it's been taught throughout generations that if you're dark, you're not good enough. And it's trying to break those. It's a difficult conversation, because I've got heated arguments with my parents discussing about it. But I've now known that in the future, when I have nieces and nephews, I will teach them differently. I will tell them that being brown is beautiful and being darker is beautiful, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. So I think it is a progress, and I think maybe we could be the generation that starts breaking the standards and stuff. But I've started already telling my nieces and nephews, you are beautiful as you are. You don't have to look at the standards of stuff. But again, I think it's a long process, and as you've mentioned, it's over time things have changed, and I think things will continue to change. It would just be a lot of us just put in the effort to make the change, I think, yeah. But yeah, on that, I'll be leaving. Thank you.
Can you give a final thought before you leave? Or was that your final thought?
That was my final
thought. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And you have a point here?
In terms of like thinking about what we can do ourselves, especially like the younger generation of like, I mean like dismantling racism is obviously such like a fucking gigantic thing to say and imagine doing. But in terms of like the small things, like what I find personally that always comes up for me is like on social media, and because social media is just like such a huge thing, is like not, in some way just like not tolerating the celebrities, obviously talking about the Kardashians, that just like continuously bullshit and F up, like, and just completely appropriate specifically black culture, and they're just so terrible with it continuously. And there's loads of other celebrities that are guilty of it, but I mean, like, I think the Kardashians hold the crown for it. But I mean, like, boycotting sounds like a bit savage, but honestly, like, they like just constantly do stuff, whether it's like appropriating hairdos, whether it's supporting fashion brands that have such a dark history in racism, and it's just like, yeah, I feel like one of the good things to do is like, I don't know, to tell your friends like, unfollow Kylie Jenner or something, just like stop keeping the cycle going with them like reigning, because they hold such, what would the word be? Like so many young people look up to them and learn from them, yeah, and it's just, they're just not good teachers.
Okay. All right, we're going to continue this discussion, but I'm just going to pop into your head. How would you see places like the Natural History Museum or other museums representing and tackling this systemic, these systemic problems? Sorry, you had your hand up first.
Sorry.
We'll get back to you.
So quickly, first about just a point before, I feel like a lot of these issues, sort of like what you were talking about with the Eurovision and how your culture was being represented, there's so much internalized stigma as well, and internalized like stereotypes, because to an extent, like I look at my parents and I see like how, because I'm from like Jewish descent, and they'll often like represent things in like, say, like they'll tell people that they're Jewish, and they'll often like say it with a face that's like, oh yeah, I'm Jewish. So it's like, but it's something to be proud of. It's like very internalized how the hate is like, often we can take it and we can tell lies to ourselves and be unaccepting. And so I feel like, obviously, like being open and stuff. What was your question again? I completely forgot.
How can places like the Natural History Museum or other institutions along these lines tackle the systemic problems?
So I feel like exactly this, doing nights like this, holding a space to give people voices and just opportunities to be able to come together and express each other's like views. And I feel like the world is evolving towards this change. It's happening. Like the fact that we are all here discussing this, and there are so many people who are engaged in this discussion, is complete proof of that. And so I feel like just more of this. It's baby steps, it really is, because when you look so far into the future and you see like, okay, dismantling racism as a whole, of course, that seems like kind of unattainable, sort of like, it's a big concept, it's massive, but it's these baby steps that we take. It's like the individual sort of coming together, it's like of little communities that will eventually
make
sort
a larger change.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go as well.
All right. So that was your final thought. Final thought from you before you leave, please.
Unfortunately, I have to go, but my final point is very similar to yourselves. It's yeah, this space is really important. Having safe spaces to have really earnest and meaningful conversations about race and about anything is really important, and that's how, that's how we can progress and evolve.
I know you're going as well, please.
More nights like this, please.
All right, more nights like this.
All right, so we have some free spaces over here. This is an open discussion. We're trying to get as many people to come in and join. We would like a varied amount of thoughts, so please don't be shy, anyone. And we have some new faces, please.
Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Yevgeny. I'm a Belarusian American.
All right.
I'm Maya, and I live in London. What else?
That's beautiful. That's all we need. But okay, so we have a thought from Josh over here. We haven't heard from you yet.
No, not yet. If we're talking about like how to make the museum more accessible, more open, I mean, I think one of the key things that I'm really passionate about is the fact that there is this massive archive at the museum, and it's full of all of these stories of how these specimens are collected, who collected these specimens, and one thing that I just think is so, I guess, unknown about places like this is the fact that it's a public archive and that anyone can go in and anyone can request access and go and have a look and start digging through this stuff themselves. And I think that's something which is so like unknown outside of the museum and gallery world, that these places are accessible, and that if, you know, you can put in those requests and go and look through it, and everyone should, because there's loads of stuff in it. And not all of it is good, most of it's terrible.
So we'll get to everyone in time.
I think one place where the museum could start is first to reckon with their history of colonialism and how a lot of these specimens that were brought in, what were the circumstances under which they were brought in, reckon with aspects of slavery. That is a one, and the Natural History Museum is doing that, but we all know that most museums are historically extremely colonial. Oh, hi guys, girls. They're my classmates, by the way, so I'm very excited that they're here. Yeah, so I think that's one start, and we know that these institutions are deeply colonial, so reckon with that, recognize it, not just on a little plaque somewhere, but actively do that. Yeah, so that's where I think they could start.
I mean, there are definitely decolonization initiatives by the museum that you can look into, but we can talk about that some other time. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of memes out there that maybe people in the Natural History Museum don't necessarily subscribe to, and a lot of sort of myths about how our culture developed, like the kind of this idea of a very kind of straight linear trajectory of evolution, and of how cultures have, you know, effectively progressed. I'm not saying this is what the Natural Museum think, but this idea that we've kind of progressed from primitive kind of caveman, we were talking about the Flintstones earlier, from a kind of Flintstones primitive caveman, like directly to the gleaming city of London. And that is just a total myth. It's not science, and actual, you know, human evolutionary, whatever you call them, archaeologists don't believe in that either. But it's still out there, this idea of a kind of linear evolutionary progress, and I think the museum could do a lot to just, you know, to explode those ideas that exist within the common kind of, you know, it's a kind of meme, like the meme of the kind of monkey, then, you know, like a hunched guy, and then and it is a man, you know, and there's so many sort of value issues based on these kind of memes that are out there that are not necessarily current in science, but they're current within our kind of collective consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I think the best way, which has already been mentioned, is the power of representation. I'm, as a woman of colour, going to connect a lot more when I see nights like this curated by other women who look like me, and I'm going to be able to connect more, and that is a clear way to reconcile with the history of the colonisation and everything that's gone on way more. And it's going to make, like you were saying about it, there's so much here, there's so much resource, there's so much knowledge to be had, and it's not accessible because you're coming somewhere that doesn't look like it reflects you, so you're not going to want to come, and you're not going to want to be part of something. So I think there needs to be a bit, if you're asking what the Natural History Museum particularly can do, there needs to be a bigger movement towards that, getting people of way more backgrounds in these environments and doing the work to get people who look like them here so they can learn themselves as well.
Yep. That's a beautiful point.
So I'm thinking back at my experience growing up going to museums, and just growing up as a human, what sticks with you the most? It's trauma. Now, how you are exposed to trauma, how you perceive the trauma, that's every person's different. But going to museums, whether it's a slave museum in South Carolina, or Auschwitz, or the Jewish History Museum, or any of those, they hit you in the face really quickly, and they take you on a journey. A lot of them will take you on a journey of someone that their story was captured. And for me, I think that's what really pops out, is you go to a museum, you get overwhelmed by all these different things that kind of distract you and take you from one story to the next. But going on a journey and seeing the shackles or seeing the clothes that somebody wore and tying it to a story, I think that's critical in bringing that awareness from a DEI perspective and education.
Thank you. And Sarah, closing thought.
Eat potatoes. People make culture, so people can change culture, and also come out and check Team Space down there, Darwin Center.
Yes.
Bye.
Team Space down the corridor.
Hello. I think, sort of building on that, I think one of the most interesting, or I think noteworthy things about, decolonizing natural history museums and science museums is that for a really long time, those conversations focused really quite heavily on like art galleries and I think places like the British Museum. And I feel like science museums flew under the radar for a really long time. And that is only now, in the last couple of years, starting to come to the surface. And I think that's it's important to note that in the sense that I think particularly for the people who work in a lot of places like this, they are almost behind that curve and that societal change, I guess.
Thank you. Yes. Could you introduce yourself? You're new to the table.
Yes, my name is Alice.
Yes.
I'll share a quick story. When I lived in Washington, D.C., I had a friend of mine from the DRC visiting, and we went to an African art museum together, and he was just astounded by the amount of art that was there, particularly from his country, that he can't see back home, and his friends and family and peers can't see back in his home. And so he was taking pictures of everything and making sure that he could share it with everyone. And it was really heartbreaking to see that he couldn't access his own history in his home where those pieces came from. And I've appreciated how, I forget which specific museums and institutions, but some have elected to give back pieces that were forcibly taken during the colonialist era. And I think that's a movement that deserves more attention as well.
So about repatriation of collections, if anything, right? We have a new face over here as well. Could you introduce yourself? Just the name's fine.
Luna.
Nice to meet you. Yes, there's something
Yeah, just coming back to what you just mentioned. This is maybe like, I don't know that much about it, but I think a couple of weeks ago, the British, the English, how do you call the church here? The English Church of, thank you. The Church of England tried to reconcile with the kind of slavery background by, like, I think, like stealing some of the relicts and so on. But I think still the British government didn't do that at all. So I think that there's kind of a gap, and yeah, just wanted to throw that out.
Mikey, do your point? Or
yeah, I mean, I think the giving back would be so huge and so massive. You know, like it's not just, you know, in a way you can. It's easy to say sorry. It's a bit harder to take, you know, the entire wealth of this country and distribute it across the former colonies, which I think would maybe be, you know, be some go. You know, in a way, it's not necessarily about racism, but it's about a kind of global equity, and we live in a world of extreme inequality, and I think, and you know, in this country we do very, very little apart from, you know, a lip service really to fixing that inequality. But I think, you know, in a way it's connected with racism, but it's also an issue in itself.
Yes. 1 second.
I just wanted to add that, you know, talking about having programs put on or stories told by people who look like us. I think it's important to also acknowledge people who sound like us, because, you know, people have got different accents, they come from different parts of the world, and even from like places like Yorkshire, you know, or like no. But what I mean by that, you know, when you hear like when I first moved to England, and you know, I was told that the official English, the Queen's English, is the English I should be speaking. But then suddenly you've got like Channel 4 and somebody like a Geordie is doing an announcement for the next day, and you're thinking, oh yeah, you just remember. It's obvious, but you know, if you don't have it kind of like reflected back, you kind of forget that the world is bigger than what you're being served by the media. But I would say the voices are important too, because they are also part of our identity and languages that we speak. And second thing, I just wanted to kind of ask, because I remember somebody mentioned Kim Kardashian. Was it someone sitting here? Was it? Oh, no, she's gone now. But I think she recently bought Marlene Dietrich's very famous dress, which is like the diamond dress. And we were talking about appropriation. This is a point from like way back when. But is that appropriation? I wonder.
You have something to add to that? Or something to add to something before?
Yeah, I think I was going to say about, coming back to your question, about how to support and to make the movement and that kind of stuff, the Natural History Museum in particular. If you're committed to having these conversations, not to be more than just the lip service like you were mentioning, then there needs to be like the bigging up of people who are doing this work. And we spoke already about giving the mic essentially to the right people who are going to be representative and are going to have these conversations, and when those things are happening, to support them in any way you can. But I am running now, but thank you, and I have a podcast, so you should all listen to it.
Are you doing the podcast?
No, I have one.
Oh, okay.
And I have these conversations all the time. It's called Maya's Minutes.
Maya's Minutes.
And it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere. So please listen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, what happened to Justin?
I have no idea.
Yeah, okay, we bailed out.
Yeah.
He's too tough a gig. Okay, we're gonna have a little swap over, but we're gonna try and keep the conversation going. Please don't leave me at this point, because you know I've got to build the thing up again. But let's have a huge cheer for Christian. Fantastic! I can't believe that was his first go in the middle in a public space. I think that was pretty spectacular. I'm just gonna jump back in. I'm super happy about how this has gone so far, but you know the whole point of Talkaoke is up to you to decide what you want to talk about. We can go any direction, and the interesting thing happens when people want to take it in different directions. You have to try and satisfy everybody all at the same time. So you know, we've talked a lot. We've talked about decolonization, we've talked about racism, we've talked about repatriation. You're off? Okay, well, no final thought for the toilet break, but if you do leave, please give me a final thought. I'm just going to quickly get a round of names and try and, I'm trying to do this in a smooth transition, but I failed. So my name's Mikey. Let's just get some names. Tell us your name.
Evgeny.
And who have we got here?
Alice.
Alice, yep.
Lloyd.
Rianka.
Yep.
I'm Rod.
And Margot.
Timna.
And who else wants to come and join in? We can take it in any direction. We can go in the Kim Kardashian direction. It is fine. We can go wherever we want to. Where do people want to take this conversation? That's my first question. What do people want to talk about? Have we said it all already? I feel we've made progress. We've got a new face here. You're coming, marching confidently forward. What's your name?
I'm Sarah.
Sarah, have you got something to throw in?
Well, this is not. I'm not trying to make an argument here, but. I have some like mixed feelings about a topic. So I'm Turkish.
Hoş geldin.
Hoş bulduk. Thank you. So some of the pieces in the museums here, they were taken from Turkey and around the First World War.
Yeah.
I don't quite remember how and in what conditions, whether it was smugglers or the government sold them or something, but I just know that if those pieces stayed in Turkey, I don't quite know whether I would have known about them or...
Right. So in a way that sort of taking them out and sort of putting them in the museum gave them the spotlight that they wouldn't have had in Turkey?
Maybe not, the exposure, I'm not quite sure. I have very mixed feelings about it. Because on one hand, it's ours, and but also it's our responsibility to take care of it. But
okay, so
Mixed feelings.
Mixed feelings. Yeah, I get it, and I think it's nice to kind of get that sort of double, to get that more new. We talked earlier on about nuance as well. We've got another new face. Tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Evelina, and I just wanted to add something to that. I worked in Cairo for a while, and quite a lot of artifacts in the UK have been taken from there, and it's people there that are designers and makers and appreciate the value of it say exactly the same thing, that they probably wouldn't be recognized at all back then, back there, wouldn't even be preserved. So actually the fact of possessing them in any way, selling whatever, stealing whatever it was, we will probably never find out, actually helps to keep us aware and keep them being preserved in a way.
Okay, so we're seeing another. Yeah, Lloyd.
I would say to that, then it was probably just better that we said, well, we have this idea for the things that you have. Maybe you could do that, or we could do that for you. Like we come to an agreement instead of just taking it and then doing it.
Could it have been done in a more mutual way? And is it possible to do it now? I mean, as we said, it's an evolving culture. That happened back in, as you said, First World War. Can we make something of this now and actually reflect it back to Turkey or to Egypt? Was that a question over here?
No, it was more like, I think it should be possible, like, if we want to have a kind of progression, like, why can't we, like, just speak to each other? I mean, why do we have diplomats? I mean, wouldn't it be in a, let's say, in my utopian super world, that they speak to each other and they find a way, like a consent, or like a solution together. But and then
Can we keep talking about it? I'm quite interested to find out what your super utopia is like, and everybody else's for that matter. Because I guess, maybe that's not what we're up to. Hello, this is Talkaoke. At the moment, we're kind of talking about, what we're talking about? We're talking about stolen artworks and cultural artifacts, and can the museum do anything to kind of progress dismantling racism, to progress decolonization? In the museum, are we part of the problem, are we part of the solution, or a bit of both? That's what we're talking about at the moment. Come and join in. Everyone's welcome to come and have a say. It's great to get the different perspectives from Turkey, from Cairo. Lloyd, from Lloyd.
There was just something I want to say about the colonization.
Yeah.
I think, because there's a lot of things that are just brought to light. It's like, okay, fine, bring it to light, but what about challenging it? Fine, okay, it's good if the Natural History Museum brings things to light about colonization, but they should also challenge it. Say, like, what should we do about this? Things could have been done a different way. Things could still be done a different way. Like colonization is just a polished off version of invasion taking over, basically.
I mean, do they know how to challenge some of these discourses? The Natural History Museum, I'm going to ask Christian, representative of the Natural History Museum.
Challenging discourses in Natural History Museum. I think, so going to the point of repatriation of collections, if anything, a lot of the specimens that we have here, they are of a certain make, so a lot of where I work with biological specimens, so skins and skulls and preserved animals, and these are all things that need very specific parameters to be kept so that they can be preserved for future generations. A lot of the countries that these specimens have actually come from, they don't have the collections or the facilities to keep them preserved and in good manner and to make them accessible to the wider public or to science. But through collaborations with other museums or other institutions, something that the museum over here does is that we do send our curators out, our researchers out to these other countries to help them develop their own collections. And there have been initiatives where we go to field sites and we collect animals or plants or rocks or whatever it is. You try and do a Noah's Ark kind of thing now, so you can't get two at least of everything. So one specimen will go over here, and one specimen eventually stays here until we can send it back to the respective country that we've taken it from. And this helps build this, interconnected web of science later on. But this is obviously something that's only started up within recent times. So it is trying to combat the dark history of the museum, if anything.
Okay, we got a couple of new faces, so just get some names. What's your name?
Mahak. Mahak.
Mahak.
Mahak.
Mahak.
Mahak. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to do my best. Mahak, yeah, and
Ariana.
Ariana, and we've got Timna, we've got Evgeny, we have got Sarah, we have got Alice, we've got Lloyd, and Rianka, Evelina, Rod, Christian, and Margot, and I'm Mikey. So where do we want to take this? Do we want to talk about the museum practices, the network of museums? Do we want to talk about this question of decolonisation? Do we want to talk about Evgeny?
Can I continue Sarah's point on the evolution of something that was once in Turkey but now ended up in another country and no longer owned by the Turks? It took me down a bit of an interesting path of the definition of ownership and the definition of value and the evolution for, like, I think back indigenous people in the States, I think back how in exchange for a blanket there was a bunch of land. The person that owned the land or didn't know what land meant just gave it up. Same thing that's happening in Myanmar right now with Chinese people taking over a lot of natural resources because they say, okay, give me all this, I'll give you a car. If you go to a rural place and a car is presented to you, it's like out of this world.
And there's not that same concept of like perpetual ownership and, you know, the idea of even owning something is a concept that's come from elsewhere.
Right. So I feel a little perplexed with your point as well, because people don't know what they own, don't know the value at the time perhaps, and exchange it for something to survive. A blanket, some food, and you know, this massive artifact, it doesn't do much value sitting in their hut or whatever it may be at that particular time. So it's certainly a challenging point to...
Can ownership also go the other way, and in a sense, by being Turkish, you own the Turkish artifacts because it's part of your heritage, or by being...
Well, that means with that thought, nothing would ever change hands then, right? Everything would stay part of where you're coming from. So, you know, these apples are mine, these seeds are mine, all of this is mine because I originated it. So
So it's back to that question of origination again. Yeah.
But also,
Evelina?
who gave it a value? Who's educated, or who knows what the value is? What is the value? Who gave it the value? That's it.
Yeah, and the way people value things, I think, as well, is different. Is a cultural element in itself. I think is part of that point, Evgeny.
Yeah, and for me, there's kind of a link also, like coming back to the social media question, like maybe the Natural History Museum. There is social media marketing, of course, but maybe like to do something on social media more about like decolonizing, like
Could the Natural History Museum use its social media platform to address some of these issues? Could we all use our social media platforms to address some of these issues? How? I'm not really a social media person. Anyone on social media here? Explain how it works first of all, and then tell us how. Okay, is it back to you, Timna? Yeah.
Yeah, I just think like about what do you put photos on and who is on your photos. Yeah.
Okay. So you mean we should try and get more of a diverse group of selfies? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
I think people who have the power to get information out to lots of people should use that wisely. You know. One thing I was going to say earlier, just talking about how stories can be made interesting, was that Oscar Wilde said, "If you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll kill you." And I think that's you know, it's important to use what you have wisely. Comedians, for example, like they have this this medium to be able to bring truth to people and through comedy, you know, like, but still, you know, make it interesting. That's
Okay, so I mean, comedy as a vehicle, we've not really talked about that so far tonight. I've tried to throw in a few gags, but you know, some of them have landed. But I mean, can we actually use comedy as a vehicle? Is it too serious a subject? Does it undermine some of the really important things, or can it actually be in our favour to use comedy? What do people think? Yeah.
So it's a tool that you can use to even just bring things to people that they didn't know, you know, like, and talk about things and make them think about it in a different way. We've been talking about this all night, making people view things in a different way, bringing things to light. And comedy is a good way to do that, because, you know, people are more involved when they're laughing, you know, and it's like, oh, okay, but then there's some, you know, serious points there. Like Bill Hicks, for example. If you've not seen Bill Hicks, if anyone's not seen him, watch him. Like, is a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
I mean, you talk about comedy as an art form. Are there other art forms as well that can work? Is creativity is there a place for creativity in this, you know, this desire for change, this this recalibration? Was there a point from the back? I don't know, a point here, Margot?
No, but like, I understand like a stand-up comedy about some kind of social aspects or whatever, or like different things. But like, what is funny in Natural History Museum? What could be the?
Are there
like,
any?
Is nature funny? Like, I don't know.
Well, we've tried to do it a bit earlier on with the dinosaurs. Is there some potential material here?
I'm not a comedian, but I just think of comedians such as Trevor Noah, who talk about very serious instances on the news and whatnot, and turn them into something people can watch and understand the for lack of a better word, seriousness of the issue, but still laugh and feel a little bit more lighthearted about what's happening in the world when it's all so heavy. And so, with me not being a comedian, like, I look at the rhinoceros thing and it says, like, what is a rhinoceros without its context? I think that could be an angle a comedian who has that skill could play on, for
there's
example.
something funny about a rhinoceros anyway. I mean, look at this one here. You know, there's something, it just needs that comedy genius, as you say, to work it around somehow.
I think it would be interesting if you take each piece and you have a historical excerpt about where it came from, but then a comedic one that's completely a lie. And for example, if you were to say this was in the bathroom of a castle and this is what a king so-and-so looked at every day, that might be funny. But if each, exactly. So they'll be like, well, where was this really from? Actually triggers that thought from the comedic side.
Okay, so maybe a few funny stories here. I do want to say I'm not being funny or anything, but we are coming into the sort of like end point of this, so it may be time for some final thoughts here. But we have talked about a lot, so many things. Right, we started off with the question of would you eat a dinosaur? We moved through to, you know, some really sort of big questions about the collection, about colonialism, about history, about racism, about we touched a little bit on you know, equity, appropriation. We talked about cultures, appropriation versus appreciation, misunderstanding, and lots of words meaning the wrong thing, but we run with it anyway. So yeah, we talked about a lot tonight. It's been great. But yeah, maybe it is now time to get the final thoughts. It doesn't have to be a gag, but if it is funny, we'll very much appreciate it. Anyone want to go first with a final thought? I have to say, I like the awkward silences as well. But, you know, I think there's something to be said about an awkward silence as well as comedy moments. There's awkward moments, I think, as well, are really important for you know, for creating change. Lloyd.
I just think it's important that if you know some truths that you feel the world should know, then you should do, you know, what it takes, you know, to get it out there. You know, how in the best way that you think you can, you know, like, and I just think it's important, you know, knowledge is power, and there's a lot of knowledge that is restricted, held back from us, you know, like there's, you know, like history of certain kinds of people, certain races that is like you said about documented things in the history. But there's documented history of other races of people that aren't being told, you know. But they're documented, but they're just not being told. Nobody else knows about it, you know. So these sort of things need to, you know, just come out. And
I mean, we've heard a lot about the archive. It's not just what's in the archive, but where the sort of spotlight on that archive is. The huge archives that exist all around the place. I'm going to go around in a circle and just get a final thought from everyone. So it's Alice next. Have you got a final thought?
Not currently. I guess in addition to shining light on the archive, it's also using language that's accessible to the masses. And I like the point of using different voices to represent different accents, different languages. Yeah, I liked that thought. That's all.
Okay, Sarah.
Final thoughts about comedy or just in general?
Anything, whatever's on your mind. What are you going to go away thinking?
Well, I learned a lot about decolonization today, which was a topic I didn't know much about, to be frank. But in going back to comedy, I think it's a good way to raise awareness, at least to get people thinking and to keep the conversation going, basically.
Okay,
Yeah.
Keep the conversation going. A lot of people have said that, which is great for us because it means more bookings. Keep the conversation going. Very important point. Evgeny?
I think it's important to remind people that we are who we are based off the environments we were raised in. If we were raised in a diverse environment, we're going to be diverse. If we were raised in a bubble, we're going to think like we were in a bubble and we don't know what's going on. So I'd say step out of your bubble, step out of your comfort zone, challenge the norm, because every time you do, you're going to leave it with something new. I think that's probably it.
Yeah, well, that's a good final thought. It doesn't, that's step out of your comfort zone. You always learn when you're outside of the comfort zone. Ariana, final thought?
Final thought is that I'm sorry I joined so late.
Well, we'll be back. Look out for the next one.
I really joined on the tail end of this.
And if you're based in East London, you can come. We do a lot of gigs. We're more based east, so look out. Have our cards. There we go. It's time to give out the cards. It's not just the Natural History Museum. We do this, so but it might be a conversation about something completely different. We don't know what it's going to be. It's up to you to decide what you want to talk about. Timna, final thought.
I would love to hear a dinosaur fart.
Yeah. Okay. Well, somewhere there's somebody studying this, somewhere in the world. You just need to use Google Scholar and find out about it. Mahuk, final thought?
I also wasn't here for a part of the conversation, so...
Definitely not the dinosaur farting element at the beginning.
No, but I really enjoyed hearing you speak about just, I guess, how you assign value to things and, the impact of knowledge. And I really enjoyed hearing about the way that, things are processed in different countries. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Well, thanks for joining in and thanks for getting involved. Margot, final thought?
I don't know, maybe that's another kind of evolution for the People Speak to come up with a different kind of fun format for activating the archives of the, because I think this kind of conversational, collaborative approach, the kind of collective thinking and, just like kind of interrogating a piece of archive, together with this kind of like, fun angle on it may lead to some really surprising and really cool outcomes. So I'd quite like to mess around with the archive just to see, just a cookery program for dinosaurs. That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah. Okay. Christian, final thought?
I think from all the discussions, it seems like I like the phrase, "The world becomes a more beautiful place the more you know about it," and I think by understanding more of the world, you understand a lot of the other facets, and just by using knowledge, we can solve a lot of these problems that we have if we try to get people to pursue knowledge rather than other vices, habits, I don't know, but yes.
Okay, knowledge is a good habit to pursue. I'm going to sum that up as, Rod?
Yeah, I don't know, I've just been thinking about this example of the sort of theft of the Turkish artifacts, potentially raising awareness for them more than they would have had otherwise. I think that's really interesting, the sort of morals behind that, and the advantages that can come from things that are really bad. I think for me it sort of comes down to, I feel like if you sort of have ownership of something, you should have the right to not display it and not show it, even if the end result is that less people know about potentially sort of, you know, good art. I think it's important to have that kind of right to do almost like, you know, potentially make decisions that are potentially sort of cause less good in the world, because that's sort of what it means to have ownership over something, and that's kind of important to let that ownership be had. But I think it's really interesting from both sides.
Okay. It's up to the people that it belongs to. I suppose I'm going to sum that up as. Rianka, final thought?
Yeah, I was literally going to talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Just, I think it's just super important when talking about decolonialism and all of that to talk to the nations that were affected as well, because like you were saying earlier, you wouldn't have known about certain pieces of art. So, yeah.
I mean, just hang on, because I want to, when you say talk to the nations, who are you actually talking to? Because the nation is a lot of people.
Do something like this in Turkey. Talk to, have a people's assembly. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't just talk to the Prime Minister, because
the
Prime Minister here doesn't represent me, so yeah.
Okay, so just set up, maybe that's another gig for us, set up in Turkey. I could practice my Turkish language knowledge a little bit there. Probably would train somebody, ask Sarah to do it instead. Any final thoughts from the crowds, from the cheap seats? Any thoughts? Thanks everyone for listening. Seriously, this is your last chance to have your say on the mic, and can be anything at all. Could just be thanks for tonight. There's a point here. Well done, Lara. Give us a final thought.
My final thought is about social media, I guess, what you were saying earlier. You're not on social media, but the people speak is.
True.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are kind of trying to attract more people and just remind everyone that if you like this and you want to find out more about our event, you can do it.
Or if you've got more to say about this event, you know, and you don't want to maybe say it in public, you can tell us.
Tag
us. Anything. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, please
some cards,
just share the love. This is all what I wanted to add.
Really good point. Well made. Are we going to end it there? Any other final thoughts? I think we've run out of battery, so we can't play the theme music, but imagine the theme music playing now. Thanks everyone so much. It's been lovely to hear what you've got to say. I've really enjoyed it. But keep thinking, keep these discussions going. Thanks very much. Have a round of applause for everybody.